A millionaire CEO turns his back on wealthy women and shockingly falls in love with a beautiful poor waitress who served him with a smile that shattered his walls. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Night was falling over the glittering skyline of Manhattan when James Anderson, the 32-year-old CEO of Anderson Investments, closed the door to his spacious corner office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's neon pulse reflected his life of power and wealth. Deals sealed with a signature, fortunes built on a handshake, dinner invitations at elite clubs where six-figure sums were tossed around like spare change. Yet, within that sea of shimmering skyscrapers, James felt the hollow ache of loneliness. Some men would revel in that life, but for James, it was becoming a prison of polite smiles and superficial friendships. He loosened his silk tie, the brand name so exclusive that only the hyper-wealthy recognized it. Another day, another round of sycophantic clients wanting something, always wanting something. The phone on his polished mahogany desk still glowed from an earlier call. On the other end had been a prominent socialite, known for her glamorous parties and for frequently appearing on gossip websites. Her voice was syrupy sweet with offers of private dinners and charity galas, but James had turned her down politely. It would have been the third invitation that week from equally wealthy, equally ostentatious women whose interest in him had nothing to do with who he truly was, only what he represented. A wealthy, powerful CEO, the heir to a fortune that soared into the billions. He leaned against the window, arms folded, gazing at the lively metropolis below. It was a moment of reflection that felt heavier than usual. At 32, he had the world at his feet, yet lacked genuine, heartfelt companionship. Too many times he'd caught that flash of calculation in his date's eyes, as if they were scanning him for benefits, for status. On more than one occasion, he had overheard whispered conversations about him being a golden ticket, an entree into the highest social echelons. And with each new encounter, he was left with the same gnawing emptiness. His father, the venerable Robert Anderson, had built Anderson Investments from the ground up, forging it into a juggernaut of finance. James grew up witnessing wealth as a byproduct of relentless work, but also the heartbreak that came when so-called friends vanished in hard times. He had promised himself he'd never fall into that trap, handing out trust too easily. Yet, ironically, the safety net he built around his heart left him alone in a gilded cage. Now, as the stars glimmered over the city, he wondered if he would ever meet someone who saw him not as an ATM in a tailored suit, but simply as James. The next day, as sunlight streamed into his office, a persistent thought gnawed at him. How to escape this cycle of empty relationships? He had already turned down another dinner invitation from a foreign heiress that same morning. His inbox was flooded with proposals to attend society events, each more lavish than the last, each with star-studded guest lists curated to guarantee maximum publicity. With a silent groan, he sank into his leather chair, skimming yet another email that dripped with flattery. "My dear James, you simply must be our guest of honor." He rubbed his temples in frustration. Meanwhile, across town in a modest apartment on the Lower East Side, Harper Morris was tying the laces of her worn-out sneakers before starting the early shift at Bluebell Diner, a small place tucked between office buildings. She was 25, with warm hazel eyes, a quick laugh, and a determination fueled by her family circumstances. Her parents had died in an accident 6 years prior, leaving Harper to care for her younger siblings Lydia and Ben, while she juggled part-time college courses. Tips from the diner barely covered the rent, and she had been receiving worrying letters from the landlord about overdue payments. Still, Harper faced the day the same way she always did, head held high, determined that somehow she would make ends meet. Back at Anderson Investments, James's personal assistant Sarah entered with a subtle knock. "Sir, you've got half an hour before your next meeting and you haven't eaten all day," she said. Sarah, who had worked for the Anderson family for years, knew James's moods better than most. He gave a soft nod, mentally debating whether to order in or just skip lunch. But the tension in his shoulders suggested he needed a breather. "I'll go out for a quick bite," he decided. "I'll be back in time for the meeting." Outside, the midday bustle of the city greeted him with honking cabs, hurrying pedestrians, and the constant swirl of possibility. Stepping away from the glossy Anderson Investments Tower, James felt a small wave of relief. Gone were the incessant phone calls, the demands on his time, the emails loaded with veiled agendas. As he walked, he loosened his tie, letting the vibrant energy of the streets wash over him. Several blocks later, his feet carried him into a quaint little diner with a neon sign that read, "Bluebell Diner." The establishment was far from opulent, its decor dated, the tables slightly worn. Yet something about the place seemed genuine. A comforting aroma of coffee and grilled sandwiches filled the air. James took a seat in a booth by the window, scanning the menu. There were no fancy artisanal items or extravagant culinary inventions. Instead, the menu listed classic items: burgers, BLTs, soups of the day. It was a welcome simplicity. He was about to call a waiter when Harper approached. She wore a simple uniform with a name tag pinned slightly askew and carried an order pad. "Welcome to Bluebell," she greeted. There was no flash of recognition in her eyes, no squeal of, "You're James Anderson," something James almost expected whenever he dared to step out without a bodyguard or fancy reservations. Here, he was just another customer. For a brief second, he almost laughed. How refreshing. Harper offered a friendly smile. "Ready to order?" Her tone wasn't forced or fawning. It was simply courteous. James quickly glanced over the menu. "I'll have the roast chicken sandwich and an iced coffee," he said. "Sure, coming right up," Harper replied, scribbling down his order, then turning to another table without lingering to chat or pepper him with questions. James found himself oddly intrigued. Typically, whenever he sat down in a restaurant and people recognized him, they'd either try to impress him or slip him business cards. The waiters sometimes fussed over him more than necessary, hoping for a large tip or a business opportunity, but not here. Harper treated him as if he were just an ordinary guy who needed a sandwich, a calm break from the corporate hustle. He liked that. Minutes later, Harper returned with his meal. Placing the plate down, she noticed the tension in his posture. "Everything all right? You seem a little on edge." She didn't say it with curiosity about his net worth or his personal life. It was more of a friendly question, the way you'd ask any stranger who seemed stressed. James blinked, a bit taken aback by her blunt sincerity. "Work's a bit hectic, that's all," he replied. She nodded, sympathetically. "Yeah, I get that. My shifts can be crazy too. Even if it's just a diner, balancing life outside here isn't always easy." Then she excused herself to check on another customer. In that small moment, James felt an odd sense of connection. She talked about stress in the same breath that he did, though her stress likely came from a place he couldn't fully comprehend yet, supporting her siblings on a waitress's salary. Meanwhile, his own stress was from corporate expansions, million-dollar deals, and board meetings that spanned half the globe. Two different worlds, meeting over the simple solution of a roast chicken sandwich and iced coffee. He finished his meal and left a tip, larger than normal, yet not ostentatiously so. As Harper collected the money, she didn't gush or fawn over the tip. She simply smiled politely, gave him his change, and thanked him. "Hope to see you again," was all she said before heading to the kitchen. Her words left a surprising warmth in James's chest, a sentiment that lingered even as he walked back to his office. The next day, James found himself drawn back to the same spot around lunchtime, ignoring the half-dozen upscale bistros his elite peers frequent. The staff recognized him and greeted him with easy smiles, not the carefully practiced ones he was used to. Harper noticed him entering and gestured that she'd be with him soon. Again, he felt that odd sense of relief. No special treatment, no contrived interest. Just an honest greeting from a person who had no hidden agenda, no desire to profit from his name. But this second visit revealed something else. Harper appeared more tired, a faint shadow beneath her eyes. When she delivered his coffee, her hand trembled slightly. James, who had grown adept at reading subtle cues in boardrooms, recognized the signs of stress. "Long day already?" he asked quietly. She exhaled, managing a small smile. "Something like that. Rent's overdue, and I'm trying to figure out how to keep the apartment while still taking care of Lydia and Ben, my younger siblings. Sorry, I shouldn't unload that on a customer." She paused, embarrassed. "That's not your problem, obviously." A pang of concern tugged at James, surprising him with its intensity. "No, it's okay," he said, voice gentle. "I asked." She gave a shrug that tried to be nonchalant. "It'll work out. It has to." Her voice was resolute, but her eyes betrayed deeper fears. Then, as if reminding herself that she was on the clock, she mustered a bright grin and added, "Anyway, let me know if you need anything else." James nodded but found himself unsettled. Typically, if someone mentioned money problems, an opportunistic alarm rang in his mind. Did they want something from him? But Harper's vulnerability wasn't about seeking a bailout. It was a statement of her reality, spoken in passing, the way one might mention an approaching storm. And that was precisely what touched James at his core. She wasn't vying for pity. She was simply sharing the truth. He stayed at the diner longer than necessary, sipping coffee until it turned lukewarm, scanning over work emails on his phone. Each new message was about expansions and high-stakes deals, ironically overshadowed by the genuine concern he now felt for a waitress he'd barely met. By the time he left, he resolved to come back soon. Something about her grounded him in a way no glittering socialite or high-powered heiress had ever managed. Days melted into a habit, James escaping his corporate tower for an hour, seeking refuge at Bluebell. With each visit, he learned a little more about Harper, how her sister Lydia was about to turn 14 and discovered a love for painting, how Ben at 11 was struggling in math but adored science experiments, how Harper juggled her shifts and night classes in hopes of eventually getting a degree in hospitality management, and how the landlord had given her 1 month to catch up on the rent or face eviction. One afternoon, as he was finishing a slice of homemade pie, another diner special that had become his favorite, James overheard a snippet of conversation between Harper and the diner owner. The man's face was stern. His voice was hushed but urgent. "I know times are tough, kid, but we can't float you another paycheck in advance. I'm sorry. The business is tight these days." Harper nodded, her expression one of quiet defeat. James carefully looked away, not wanting to intrude, but inside his heart twisted. He was used to seeing people do anything to get more from him, these lavish women, investors or acquaintances who hovered around him like moths to a flame. Yet here was Harper, struggling in silence, not once asking for his help. Instead, she stepped outside between shifts, massaging her temples and making phone calls to manage bills and check on her siblings, wearing that brave face as though everything would be all right. Later that evening, James couldn't chase away the image of Harper's weary eyes from his mind. He sat in his penthouse, overlooking the city lights. But instead of the usual satisfaction those glittering towers brought him, he felt uneasy. A question rose, unbidden and uncomfortable. What is the point of all this wealth if I can't use it to help someone in real need? Someone who doesn't even know or care about my last name? He recalled the smug laughter of those socialites who always surrounded him. Where were they now? Why were none of them in his thoughts this late at night? Because their presence, he realized, had been purely transactional. In contrast, Harper, exhausted, honest Harper, had become a bright spot in his day without trying. She just was. She just existed. As the city lulled into a deeper night, James found himself wrestling with a plan. His resources were immense. One well-placed phone call could pay off Harper's overdue rent for the next year. Yet he also knew how proud she seemed. Harper might refuse outright if she suspected the help came from him. Perhaps there was a way to intervene secretly, anonymously, so that she and her siblings wouldn't lose their home. He contemplated how to handle it carefully, ensuring he didn't bruise her dignity or make it look like a handout. In the reflection of the window glass, James saw his own face, tired, resolute. A man about to cross a line he'd never even approached before, using his resources not to close a $1 million deal or impress a circle of social sharks, but to genuinely rescue someone from a crushing burden. A faint flicker of excitement coursed through him, followed by nerves. He didn't fully understand it, but he knew helping Harper might just be the first real, heartfelt thing he'd ever done outside the corporate world. He took a deep breath and reached for his phone. If he was going to do this, he would need the help of someone who could keep it discreet, his personal assistant Sarah, perhaps, who had proved trustworthy throughout every crisis. The plan was forming in his head. Harper wouldn't lose her home. That was his vow, made in the hush of midnight, far above a city that never slept. Little did James know that single decision would set off a chain of events that forced him to confront not only the relentless greed of those in his orbit, but his own willingness to sacrifice everything, his fortune, his status, and maybe even his heart, for a love he never realized he was missing. The next morning, James Anderson slipped into the office with a focused expression. He'd barely slept, consumed by the idea of helping Harper behind the scenes. Whenever that plan bubbled in his thoughts, he felt a strange mixture of apprehension and excitement. He was crossing a threshold he'd never crossed before, using his wealth to covertly lift someone out of financial chaos, a person who had no clue that he was anything more than a mildly stressed businessman seeking a quick lunch. His assistant, Sarah, caught the determined glint in his eye as she followed him into his office. She set a latte on his desk, the kind he usually downed between conference calls, and asked gently, "You seem deep in thought, sir. Something I should know?" James turned the latte cup in slow circles, pushing aside the usual concerns of quarter earnings and overseas expansions. "I need your help with something personal." He paused, searching for the right words. "I want to pay off someone's overdue rent, anonymously." Sarah had handled countless personal requests before, organizing James's father's medical bills when he was ill, or quietly transferring family funds during charity auctions, but this was different. "I see," she said, watching him carefully. "Any particular instructions?" James let out a breath. "I've got a name, an address, my friend's behind on payments, and I can't let them be evicted. But this person is proud, so no overt checks, no mention of me. I'm trusting you to keep it strictly confidential." Sarah gave a small nod. "Understood. If they're renting from a private landlord, we can contact him directly. We'll frame it as a philanthropic gesture from an anonymous donor. Do you have the details?" He slid a slip of paper across the desk with Harper's building address and the landlord's info he'd gleaned from some quick inquiries. It didn't take much digging. James had asked a private contact to find who owned the property. He despised going behind Harper's back, but the alternative was letting her lose the apartment. "Thank you, Sarah," he said quietly, and there was genuine relief in his eyes. Sarah studied him a moment longer. In all her years working for James, she rarely saw him that invested in a personal matter. As she left, she wondered who had managed to touch the heart of the famously aloof CEO. Moments later, James sank into his chair. He should have turned his attention to the pile of documents requiring signatures, but his mind kept returning to Harper. Would she suspect anything? Probably not, since she barely knew about his fortune, and she never once asked. Perhaps that was the reason he felt so driven to help. She treated him as an equal, gave him sincerity without expecting a cent. This was the least he could do, he told himself. That afternoon, he found himself at Bluebell Diner again. The bell on the door jingled, and the faint hum of busy lunchtime customers enveloped him in instant warmth. Harper was serving a table near the window, balancing a tray with practiced ease. When she noticed James, she nodded in greeting, not dropping everything to rush over. No fuss, no special grin of recognition. Still, He caught the subtle gratitude in her gaze, as if the sight of a friendly face gave her a small boost. He slipped into a booth, placed his blazer on the seat beside him, and waited until she made her way over. "You're becoming a regular, Mr. Roast Chicken Sandwich," Harper teased lightly, scribbling on her notepad. Then, dropping her voice, she added, "Would you like your usual?" Her teasing tone made him chuckle. "Yes, but toss in a slice of apple pie." He tilted his head. "How are things today?" Harper glanced around to ensure no other customers were waiting. "Better, maybe. I'll figure something out for rent soon." She shrugged, that determined grit in her posture. I've also been searching for second jobs." Her voice dropped lower. "I hate that my siblings see me so frazzled. They deserve a normal life." The pang in James's chest returned. He wanted to shout, "I already took care of it. This month's rent, next month's too." But revealing that would undo the discreet plan. Instead, he said, "I'm sure something will come through. You do so much already, they're lucky to have you." Her smile was small but genuine, and she murmured a thank you before heading off to the kitchen. That evening, as the city skyline glistened beyond his penthouse windows, James's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Payment has been arranged, sir." The landlord accepted. Entire debt cleared. He exhaled, relief flooding him. It's done, he thought. Harper and her siblings would stay in their home. He pictured Harper's reaction when the landlord told her. Maybe she'd be shocked, suspicious even. But with any luck, the landlord would keep it vague. A philanthropic group, an anonymous donation, whatever story Sarah spun. The last thing James wanted was for Harper to sense his involvement and feel indebted or singled out. Yet he also dreaded the chance she might never realize someone cared enough to bail her out. That she might chalk it up to a banking error or some random stroke of luck. But in the end, anonymity mattered more. Let her believe in miracles, if that's what it took to preserve her self-esteem. The next day, James fought the urge to rush to the diner. Instead, he worked through half the morning in back-to-back negotiations. The board had big decisions about acquiring a smaller tech firm, a strategic move that, under normal circumstances, would command his full focus. However, a part of him kept glancing at the clock, counting down to lunch, itching to see if Harper showed any sign of relief. When noon arrived, he practically bolted, ignoring the raised eyebrows from senior associates. Sarah just gave him a tight smile. She knew exactly where he was heading. At Bluebell, he slid into his regular booth. Harper noticed him, but was across the room with a family table taking orders. Her hair was pinned in a neat bun, and she seemed a bit tired but not as tense as usual. Finally, she came over. "Hey there, good to see you," she said, flipping her notepad open. Her expression wasn't wildly different, no huge grin or leaps of joy. Did the landlord not tell her yet? "The usual?" she asked, which made James grin. Of course. But before he could pose a casual question about her living situation, Harper blurted quietly, "You won't believe what happened." She glanced around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "My landlord said I don't owe anything for last month. He claimed I'd been accepted into some relief program he enrolled in, like a charitable housing fund, and apparently I qualify for a few more months of reduced payments." Her eyes were wide, shining with cautious relief. "I have no idea how. He's never even mentioned a program like that." James forced a look of mild surprise. "That's fantastic. I guess you caught a break?" "That's what I'm hoping," she replied, biting her lip. "At first I worried it might be a scam or some mistake, but the landlord showed me an official confirmation letter with a seal and everything. It means we're safe. Lydia and Ben won't be uprooted." She paused, her voice catching. "It just feels surreal." Her raw emotion stirred a warmth in James's chest. He managed a gentle nod. "Sometimes good things happen out of nowhere, and if you qualify, then you deserve it, right?" She blinked a few times, as though overwhelmed. "Yeah, I guess so. I'm beyond grateful." Her gaze flickered downward, then back up. Anyway, I shouldn't stand here babbling. She gave him a faint, teary-eyed smile. Thank you for listening. Let me get your lunch order in. James watched her walk away, a small weight lifting from his own shoulders. Inside, he felt an unfamiliar surge of joy, as though he'd truly done something meaningful. He had spent billions acquiring companies, yet none of that had moved him like quietly easing the burden of this waitress. He took a sip of water, letting that feeling settle. When Harper brought his coffee, her expression had softened. She set the cup down, then spoke in a low voice. I haven't even told my siblings yet. I want to be sure everything's legit. But if it is, it changes everything. Maybe I can cut back on a second job search. She hesitated, looking at James closely. Isn't that wild? One day you think you're on the edge of eviction and the next you're safe. James nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Life can surprise you. He sipped the coffee, feeling oddly shy. He was used to orchestrating multi-million-dollar deals, but a simple, heartfelt moment like this left him unsure what to say. Harper quietly excused herself, turning to greet new customers at the entrance. A faint smile lingered on her face, a hopeful glimmer that hadn't been there before. James couldn't help noticing how it brightened her features, how a sense of calm replaced the constant worry that once shadowed her eyes. He told himself this was enough. He didn't need recognition. Seeing her relieved, seeing her siblings safe, was all the reward he desired. But fate rarely lets a story unfold so tidily. Unbeknownst to James, the city's gossip columnists had picked up rumors of a reclusive, newly single billionaire frequenting a modest diner. Word spread like wildfire among certain social circles. A paparazzo, tipped off by a well-connected socialite James had recently turned down, was lurking in the area, hoping to catch a photo of the mysterious scenario. So the next day, as James left Bluebell, a flashbulb went off. Startled, he turned, spotted a camera lens pointed at him. He instinctively raised an arm to shield himself. Mr. Anderson, any comment on your new lunch habits? The paparazzo called, voice dripping with insinuation. James gritted his teeth. He'd always been private, never one to flaunt relationships or personal details. The reporter's presence felt invasive. No comment, he muttered, hurrying away. But the damage was done. Pictures were snapped, and within hours, an article popped up online with speculative captions, Billionaire James Anderson slumming it at a low-end diner, followed by tasteless insinuations. Seated in his office, James read the piece with simmering anger. The journalist painted an unflattering picture, claiming James must be chasing authentic experiences for publicity or trying to woo a mystery waitress. The article included grainy shots of him stepping out of the diner, the sign partially visible in the background. They didn't mention Harper by name, thankfully, but they implied enough that readers might guess who served him. This is the last thing I wanted, James thought. He cringed, picturing Harper's reaction if she saw the piece. If he was worried about her discovering his identity before, now there might be an internet trail leading straight to her. A knock on his office door made him turn. Sarah entered, grim-faced. Sir, I'm sorry. I just saw the tabloid link. It's spreading on social media. Some of your business associates have been asking if you're dating a diner girl. I'm paraphrasing, she added apologetically. James slammed his laptop shut, frustration roiling inside. I can't believe how petty they are. This is exactly why I keep my personal life sealed. He rubbed his temple. If this nonsense grows, it could embarrass Harper. Sarah nodded. We can attempt to do damage control, issue a firm no comment from the PR department, or we can say you're scouting real estate in that area, some innocuous reason you've been there. She studied James carefully. But that might still invite more speculation. He gave a resigned sigh. I won't lie about my reasons for visiting. I'll just say no comment. Let them spin their stories. The truth was, Every denial or spin would only fuel the tabloid gossip. He worried about Harper's privacy. If journalists started prowling around the diner, her modest life would be thrust into a spotlight she never asked for. Before Sarah left, she paused. "What about Miss Harper? Should we warn her?" James stood, gazing out the window at the city below. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe a heads up is best, so she's not blindsided." That afternoon, he returned to Bluebell earlier than usual, hoping to catch Harper before the lunchtime rush. She greeted him with a soft grin, but he saw confusion flicker in her eyes. "Why is he here this early?" He gently guided her aside. Can we talk for a minute? Outside?" She nodded, slipping away from the counter to follow him out to a quieter spot by a row of parked cars. The din of city traffic gave them just enough background noise to feel alone in conversation. James cleared his throat. "I want to warn you. A tabloid posted an article about me. They took photos of me leaving the diner." He winced, noticing her startled expression. "They're turning it into some silly gossip piece. They don't mention you by name, but they hint that I might be seeing a waitress here. I just wanted you to know in case you see cameras or, I don't know, if any strangers come around asking questions." Harper's cheeks paled. Wow." She shook her head. "I've never even been near that kind of attention." He let out a weary breath. "I hate that you might get dragged into this. It's my fault. My face is a magnet for speculation. If anyone bothers you, just direct them to my office. You don't deserve to be harassed." Harper studied him for a moment, processing. "So, you're telling me you're a pretty big deal, huh?" Her tone was guardedly light, but he sensed the swirl of emotions behind it. He shrugged, trying to minimize. "I'm CEO of a large investment company. Some social circles pay more attention to that than they should." Silence. Then Harper swallowed hard. "I see." She rubbed her arms against the slight chill. "So those gossip pages are just leaping to conclusions?" James managed a wry smile. "They always do. I just wanted you to be aware. And I'm sorry. This is the last thing you need." She gave a half nod, her gaze distant. "I appreciate you warning me. Guess I won't let it rattle me too much. Customers already talk about a lot of random stuff. This might be a new highlight." She tried a small laugh that didn't entirely hide her worry. "I'm nobody important, so I doubt they'll chase me, right?" He hesitated. "I hope not." But inside he knew how relentless paparazzi could be, especially if they caught wind that there was a sweet angle, billionaire and an unassuming diner waitress. In the distance, a city bus roared past, carrying tired workers and wide-eyed tourists. Harper looked at James with a new seriousness. "I'm not really sure how to handle this, or if I'm ready to be in that kind of spotlight." She paused, chewing her lip. "Though we're not exactly anything, you know." Her cheeks colored slightly. "I mean, you come here for lunch and I serve you coffee. That's the extent of it. It's silly for them to say we're dating." James felt an odd pang in his chest. The truth of that statement stung more than he expected. "Yes, it's silly," he echoed. But a small corner of his heart wondered if, maybe in another world, he'd like that rumor to be true. He brushed the thought away. Things were complicated enough. An awkward pause settled, and then Harper forced a smile. "Anyway, thanks for letting me know. I'll keep my eyes open. And I guess I'll see you around, yeah?" He nodded, an uncomfortable swirl in his stomach. "Yeah, take care." As Harper headed back inside, James lingered on the sidewalk, mind racing. Would this be the turning point that ruined everything? He'd wanted so desperately to protect her from losing her home, from corporate greed, from heartbreak, but ironically, his presence might threaten her peace in a different way. In the restaurant's window, he caught a reflection of himself, the stiff set of his shoulders, the hesitation in his eyes. He realized that the deeper he waded into Harper's life, the more precarious the line he walked. He had saved her apartment, but he couldn't control the intrusive glare of the media. Resigned, he slipped his hands into his pockets and walked away, vowing to manage any fallout. Yet inside him stirred a deeper fear. Was Harper's simplest, purest life about to be upended by the illusions and intrigues of his world? And how could he shield her if it all went wrong? The tabloid piece on James Anderson's secret diner habit continued to ripple through the city's gossip channels. Within days, the story was picked up by another website, then a local blog, each one twisting it into its own salacious angle. Billionaire slumming for love, or heir to Anderson Investments and his mystery girl. Harper Morris was never explicitly named, nor was Bluebell Diner spelled out, but locals who frequented the area recognized the neon sign in the photos. It wouldn't take a genius to figure out which waitress might be the rumored focus of the speculation. In the initial aftermath, Harper tried her best to ignore the flutter of anxiety that followed her every step. The diner owner, a no-nonsense man named Pete, grunted when he saw the growing attention. "I don't want this place turning into a circus," he mumbled one morning, flipping through a newspaper that carried an article about James. "But it's your life, Harper. You need to do what's best for you." She felt the weight of the words. Sure enough, a day later, a couple of camera-toting strangers loitered outside the diner near lunchtime. Their lenses weren't pointed at the sign or random customers. They aimed at every waitress that stepped out, their curiosity clearly fixed on identifying the rumored mystery woman. Harper noticed them lingering under the diner's striped awning, glancing expectantly at any female staff member who walked by. Her nerves simmered. She tried to keep Lydia and Ben out of it, instructing them to head straight home after school, not to mention anything personal if approached. Her siblings took the warning seriously. Lydia, with her budding teenage curiosity, asked, why would they even care about some diner waitress? Harper's heart pinched at how calmly Lydia said it, as though perplexed that Harper's ordinary life could spark paparazzi interest. "It's complicated," Harper replied gently, "but don't worry. We'll be fine." But reality struck a little harder one evening when they were all home, finishing up a cheap but lovingly prepared spaghetti dinner. Lydia's phone buzzed with a text from a school friend. The friend had forwarded a snippet from an online forum. "Is this your sister?" The photo attached was a grainy shot, apparently captured from across the street, showing Harper carrying a tray of empty glasses inside Bluebell. The caption read, "Could this be billionaire Anderson's secret fling?" Harper's cheeks burned. The concept that her image, however grainy, was being tossed around for strangers to debate and judge made her feel exposed. She forced a reassuring smile for Lydia and Ben's sake. "Just ignore it, guys. It's nonsense." Her voice trembled slightly. Later that night, once the kids were in bed, she sank onto the sofa and stared at the phone screen. Her life, a life defined by paychecks and diner tips, was now fodder for the bored and curious. The next day, James dropped by Bluebell as usual, but Harper could sense the tension in his posture the moment he entered. He surveyed the diner quickly, his gaze flicking to the windows as if scanning for paparazzi. That morning's headlines had gotten more brazen. "Rich tycoon or romantic renegade? Anderson's repeated lunch spot hides a pretty waitress." Harper approached his booth, heart drumming. "They're outside again," she said quietly. "3 of them, down by the corner. Are you sure you want to be here?" James gave her a wry half-smile, clearly apologetic. "They can stand on the sidewalk all they want. I'm not giving up my sandwich and coffee." But the joke fell flat. Both of them realized how complicated this had become. Harper pursed her lips. She lowered her voice, noticing customers at nearby tables craning their necks. "Pete is worried it might drive folks away. Regular customers don't like being photographed coming in and out." She paused, then added, "And if it draws more attention, it could get worse." James's jaw set in frustration. He hadn't anticipated how deeply the tabloids could mess with Harper's livelihood. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I never intended any trouble for the diner. If I skip this place for a while, maybe it'll all blow over." She shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Maybe that's best, at least until the reporters find a new story." Yet saying it left a slight ache in her chest. She had grown used to James's daily presence, his kind questions, his comforting smile. The day suddenly felt gloomier at the prospect he might vanish from her routine. He nodded reluctantly. "All right, let's do that. For your peace of mind, if nothing else." Before Harper could respond, a large man in a baseball cap burst in, camera slung around his neck. Eyes bright with the thrill of a potential scoop, he spotted James in his booth. "Mr. Anderson," the man called out, "any comment on your rumored relationship with—" James shot up from his seat, protective instincts flaring. "Sir, this is private property. You need to leave." His voice was calm but rigid with authority. Pete stomped over, face red with anger. "Out!" he barked, pointing at the door. The man tried to snap a photo, but James spun away, and Pete practically shoved him outside. Customers gaped, some murmuring indignantly. Others appeared intrigued, excited by the drama. Harper stood frozen, cheeks aflame, wishing she could disappear. James tried to muster a composed expression. "I'll go," he said, reaching for his wallet to drop money on the table, not even waiting for change. He paused to catch Harper's eye. "I'm sorry this happened." Then he strode out, ignoring the paparazzo's renewed shouts from the street. In the aftermath, the diner filled with uneasy chatter. Pete approached Harper, concern etched on his features. "Kid, you all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "I'll manage," she said quietly. She wasn't upset at James. She was upset at how quickly the media had turned her quiet life upside down. Sensing her turmoil, Pete patted her shoulder and muttered, "Don't let 'em rattle you. They always move on to another scandal eventually." Over the next couple of days, the tabloids exploded with pictures of the scuffle. "Anderson confronts paparazzi in diner showdown," cried one sensational headline. Another blog claimed an anonymous source confirmed that the waitress was definitely more than just a friend. The falsehoods piled up in clickbait fashion, stoking curiosity. The frenzy only fueled more speculation. Who was this woman that a billionaire would defend so fiercely? For Harper, the harassment escalated to phone calls at the diner. Random people claiming to be reporters or casting agents asked for her schedule or tried to coax her into revealing details. When she refused, the calls sometimes turned snide or insulting. At home, the phone rang with unknown numbers. She and her siblings learned to let it go to voicemail. Lydia overheard a classmate gossiping about how Harper must be sleeping with a rich dude to pay the rent. That rumor burned Harper's ears when Lydia tearfully recounted it. The girl's jaw tightened in protective anger. "It's not fair. You haven't done anything wrong." With a grim sigh, Harper tried to reassure her siblings. "I know it's not fair, but it'll die down. We just keep to ourselves, okay?" She spoke as confidently as she could, though inside she felt battered by a storm that had arrived without warning. Meanwhile, James wrestled with frustration. He had avoided Bluebell Diner since the incident, hating the idea of fueling the press. Instead, he had lunch in his office or used a private dining room in a partner's building. He kept up with updates from Sarah, who discreetly visited the diner to see if paparazzi still lingered. She reported they were less frequent but remained persistent, like scavengers waiting for fresh drama. "They're hoping to spot you again or catch that waitress in a compromising moment," Sarah sighed. "I'm sorry." For James, the sense of helplessness was alien. He was a man accustomed to wielding power and resources to solve problems. But how to fix this? He contemplated legal measures, restraining orders, cease and desist letters. That might only intensify the story. Another approach was to release a statement insisting there was no romantic relationship. But that could embarrass Harper, suggesting she was the reason for some unrequited rumor. Late one night, James found himself pacing around his penthouse, staring at the city lights. He'd helped Harper once by clearing her rent debt. Now, ironically, he was partly the reason she was under siege. The memory of her anxious expression gnawed at him. He grabbed his phone and tapped her number. She'd given it to him once in case a job opportunity might appear. His finger hovered over the call button. It was 11 p.m., though. Would she be awake? Should he even risk more contact? He made the call. A moment later, her voice came through, soft and surprised. "Hello?" "It's James," he murmured, feeling strangely vulnerable. Sorry it's late, I wanted to check how you're doing, how your siblings are doing." There was a pause, and he could sense her exhaustion. "We're okay. It's been a headache, but I'm dealing with it." Then her tone grew quieter. "You shouldn't apologize. It's not like you chose this mess." He exhaled, relief and regret flooding him simultaneously. "I still feel responsible. If I had never stepped into that diner—" "Don't say that," Harper cut in gently. "We all have choices, but you didn't ask for paparazzi either. It's just, these vultures find a story wherever they can. You're not the villain here." Her words soothed him more than he realized. "Still, if there's anything you need, security maybe, a private arrangement." She let out a short, tired laugh. "A bodyguard at my apartment? That'd freak out the neighbors, not to mention Lydia and Ben. I appreciate the offer, but no, we'll manage." He mulled over her answer. "All right. But if it worsens, promise you'll let me know?" She hesitated. "I promise," she said softly, though they both understood that life rarely bowed to promises. They spoke a bit longer. He asked about her shifts, the kids, her classes. She inquired about his day, those high-powered meetings that she couldn't quite fathom, and teased him about missing the best roast chicken in the city. It felt heartbreakingly normal, as if the swirl of tabloid mania didn't exist for those few minutes. When at last they hung up, James stared at the phone, wishing he could do more for her, wishing she'd lean on him, but respecting her boundaries. He realized with a jolt just how much he craved her trust, her comfort, her presence. It was more than a passing interest. The intensity of his feelings caught him off guard. The following week, the tabloid's interest began to drift elsewhere. A celebrity divorce, a political scandal, fresh chum in the waters for the press. The cameras stationed near Blue Bell started thinning out, and the phone calls waned. Harper breathed cautious relief. Maybe the wave was finally cresting. James kept his distance a bit longer, wanting to ensure it was genuinely safe before he returned to the diner. He settled for occasional phone calls with Harper. They never labeled those calls as dates or chats, but they drifted easily from subject to subject. The best ways to help Ben with math, the new painting Lydia was working on, business expansions he was juggling. In those conversations, she never once pried into his wealth or standing. She asked about his day not for gossip, but for genuine interest, and with every exchange, James felt a deeper bond forming. One evening, after nearly 2 weeks of avoiding the diner, James decided to test the waters again. He left the office early, quietly slipping out to walk the 10 blocks on foot, weaving through the typical Manhattan bustle. The sun was setting, painting skyscrapers in burnt gold. A swirl of nerves mingled in his stomach. Would Harper welcome him back? Had the media truly moved on? At last, he reached Blue Bell. The neon sign hummed faintly, welcoming him just as it had before. A quick glance around showed no suspicious photographers lurking. Exhaling relief, he pushed open the door. The diner was moderately busy, but nowhere near a full rush. An older couple sipped milkshakes by the corner. A student typed away on a laptop near the back. Pete was at the cash register counting out change. When Harper spotted him, her eyes flickered with warmth. For a moment, she seemed genuinely happy he'd returned. He slid into his old booth. She approached, and while her smile was subdued, it was real. "Long time no see," she teased. "I was about to replace your usual order with a new name on the menu, the chicken sandwich that billionaires fear." Her attempt at humor cracked him up. He chuckled, feeling tension slip away. "Now that's marketing I'd pay to see," he shot back. "I'd like one, please, and an iced coffee." Her gaze softened. "Coming right up." The rest of his visit felt comfortably familiar. She brought his coffee, asked about his day, told him that the kids were doing better now that things had calmed. Yet, under the easy banter, there was a subtle awareness that something had changed between them. They had shared more personal moments through those late-night calls. Their connection felt deeper, more fragile, as if both recognized an undercurrent, but were too cautious to name it. When James finished his sandwich, Harper returned with the check. He reached for his wallet, his voice quiet. "Listen, once the paparazzi fully vanish, I'd like to, maybe, take you to dinner sometime. A real dinner, not just me hogging a booth here." She blinked, color rising on her cheeks. You mean, like a date?" Her directness made him grin. "Yeah, like a date." He swallowed, anxious. "I know it might sound crazy, but I've never met anyone quite like you, and I'd like to see more of who you are, beyond these walls." The world seemed to pause in that instant. Harper's eyes searched his, measuring the sincerity of his words. After everything, the landlord's miracle, the tabloid fiasco, the hush of phone calls, she understood the risk of stepping into his orbit. But she also felt an undeniable pull. Finally, a faint, hopeful smile touched her lips. "All right," she whispered. "A date." James's heart thudded. He nodded, slipping money onto the table. "We'll coordinate. I promise it'll be somewhere private, where you won't have to fend off cameras." Her laugh was quiet, but it lit up her features. "Deal." They locked eyes a moment longer, a silent acknowledgement that this step, this acceptance, could change everything. And as she walked back toward the kitchen, James felt a surge of anticipation, tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead wasn't guaranteed to be smooth. But for the first time in a long while, hope glimmered in him stronger than fear. Harper stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the simple knee-length dress she'd purchased years ago for special occasions. Tonight she would meet James Anderson for their first real date, away from prying diner customers and inquisitive paparazzi. It was a prospect both exciting and nerve-wracking. She had debated for days what to wear. Lydia, her teenage sister, insisted on helping, rummaging through Harper's modest closet and pulling out every skirt, blouse, and dress until they settled on one that felt both casual and a bit dressy. Lydia had even braided a small portion of Harper's hair, an artistic touch that accentuated her gentle features. "Harper, you look amazing," Lydia pronounced, hands on her hips. Her voice brimmed with sisterly pride. Meanwhile, 11-year-old Ben leaned in the doorway, fidgeting with the video game in his hands. "Is that the billionaire guy again?" he asked, curious and unfiltered. "You're really going out with him?" She managed a soft laugh. "Yes, and tonight we are going somewhere quiet, so hopefully no cameras or drama." Her nerves fluttered just speaking that reality. The biggest difference was that now she knew a bit more about James's world, enough to realize how out of place she might feel. Still, she trusted him. He'd promised to pick a private location. When the doorbell rang, Ben dashed to open it. Harper felt her heart jump. James stood on the other side, wearing a crisp-collared shirt and dark slacks that looked tailored but not flashy. He offered a polite smile to Ben, handing over a small paper bag. "I brought cookies for you and Lydia," he said, voice gentle. "Hope that's okay." Ben grinned, rummaging in the bag. "Chocolate chip? Awesome!" Then the boy bounded away, hollering for Lydia to look. Nervously, Harper stepped into the doorway, meeting James's gaze. Under the warm glow of the porch light, she saw his eyes flicker with admiration. "Hi," she said softly. He let out a breath. "Hi." For a moment, they just lingered, the quiet tension of two people stepping beyond their usual friendship. Finally, James cleared his throat. offering his arm. "Shall we?" He led her to a sleek black car waiting at the curb. It wasn't ostentatious, certainly nicer than an average rideshare, but not the showy limousine one might expect from a billionaire. Once inside, the driver set off through the city streets. During the ride, Harper couldn't help noticing James's subtle glances her way, the softness in his expression. It sparked a small warmth in her chest. "He's glad to be with me," she realized. She asked about his day, and he filled her in on the typical madness of corporate acquisitions. He asked about her siblings, her classes, whether the paparazzi had fully died down at the diner. They conversed with a gentle ease that was new yet felt strangely familiar, a result of all those late-night phone calls that built a bond beyond superficial chats. Eventually, the car pulled up to a discreet entrance on the edge of Midtown. At first, Harper thought it might be a private club. There was no obvious sign, just a polished door and a subdued marquee light. But upon stepping inside, she saw it was an intimate rooftop restaurant, perched atop a mid-rise building with sweeping views of the Manhattan skyline. Dim lanterns glowed among tastefully arranged greenery. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. "It's a membership-based place," James explained quietly, guiding her to a secluded table near the edge, overlooking a sea of city lights. "The crowd here values privacy. No paparazzi allowed." A polite host greeted them, leading the way. Harper, awestruck by the ambience, murmured, "It's beautiful. I've never even heard of this spot." James smiled. "That's intentional. People come here to escape attention." And from the restful hush that enveloped the place, Harper believed him. They settled at a corner table, candles flickering. A server appeared, offering menus. Out of habit, Harper immediately scanned the right side for prices but saw none. Her stomach twisted. This must be one of those, if you have to ask, you can't afford it places. She cast James a nervous glance. He seemed to read her mind. "Don't worry about costs. Just order what you like," he said gently. She swallowed her discomfort and tried to concentrate on the descriptions of dishes, organic vegetables, hand-cut steaks, fresh seafood, artisanal sauces. Everything sounded extravagant. In the end, she opted for a salmon dish that promised a delicate citrus glaze, while James selected a roasted duck entree. As they waited, the conversation drifted toward lighter topics. A funny anecdote about Ben's science experiments, how Lydia was improving with painting. James shared a childhood memory of building toy forts in his father's large estate, always overshadowed by the presence of nannies and security. "I sometimes miss that sense of normal life," he confessed, swirling the water in his glass. "It's part of why I liked coming to your diner. Just felt real." She studied him, trying to imagine a boy with everything, yet longing for the warmth of an ordinary home. "You might be surprised," she said gently. "My life is pretty chaotic with bills and siblings. Not sure how warm it seems from the inside." He gave a soft smile. "Chaotic, maybe, but also genuine. That's rare in my world." A quiet hush enveloped them as the server arrived with appetizers, presenting them like miniature works of art. They tasted the delicacies, paper-thin slices of marinated vegetables, lightly seared scallops, each bite bursting with flavor. Harper couldn't help a small gasp of delight. "This is amazing," she admitted, leaning into James. "I don't think I've ever eaten something so fancy in my life." He chuckled, amused by her honest reaction. "I'm happy to share it with you." Under the soft lantern light, they talked about everything and nothing. Her dream of eventually running her own cafe one day, how he took a gap year traveling Europe after finishing college. She described how she balanced her classes in hospitality management, wanting to rise beyond the waitressing gig. He spoke about the pressure of heading Anderson Investments, living up to his father's legacy. Each new detail uncovered more threads binding them, forging a closeness that overshadowed the differences in their bank accounts. At one point, Harper grew pensive. "Remember how you said you felt responsible for the trouble with paparazzi?" She folded her napkin, running a finger along its edge. I never properly thanked you for how you handled it, calling me, making sure I was safe. She swallowed, recalling the relief she felt each time his voice appeared on the other end of the line. People like me, we don't usually get that kind of protection. James's eyes softened. You don't have to thank me for that. But if it means something to you, then you're welcome. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Harper let the warmth of his words wash over her. I know, and that's what scares me sometimes, she admitted, voice trembling slightly. The more I let you into my life, the more I risk the kids being dragged into the spotlight. I can handle gossip about me, but I worry about them. James reached across the table, lightly brushing his fingers against hers. I'd never let anything bad happen to them. I'll protect all of you, he said softly. Her breath caught at the sincerity in his gaze. For a moment, the world around them fell away, leaving only the shared vulnerability in that promise. She squeezed his hand, a silent acceptance of trust, even if a part of her was terrified of the unknown. Their entrees arrived, and the moment gently shifted. They savored each dish, exchanging small exclamations over the flavors. Harper's salmon was delicate and fresh, with zesty undertones that melted on her tongue. James's duck was accompanied by a tangy sauce that he insisted she taste. She giggled, leaning forward as he speared a piece with his fork and passed it across the table, which she accepted with a grin. Halfway through dinner, James glanced at her and said quietly, You know, you've changed me. Harper set her fork down, brows raised. Changed you? In what way? He gave a half laugh, searching for how to articulate the thought. Before I met you, I guess I was just lonely, tired of people chasing my money or my status. But I didn't realize how disconnected I'd become from anything real. He paused, inhaling slowly. Then you appeared, and you treated me like anyone else. No angle, no pretense. You reminded me what genuine kindness and hard work look like. And I guess that pulled me out of my own bubble. Her cheeks warmed. She never imagined she'd have such an impact on someone with such a high-powered life. I'm not special, James, she murmured. I'm just a girl trying to survive. You're so much more than that, he countered softly, meeting her eyes with an earnestness that made her heart flutter. They finished the main course, and the server discreetly cleared plates. A dessert menu was offered, boasting confections like molten chocolate cake and crème brûlée. James, glancing at Harper's delighted expression, ordered the crème brûlée to share. As they waited, they drifted into talk about future possibilities. How she might open a cafe one day after finishing her degree, how he might expand his philanthropic work to help struggling families. The conversation felt hopeful, as if imagining a path they could possibly walk together. When dessert arrived, a glossy golden custard crowned with caramelized sugar, they both leaned in for the first spoonful. Harper let out a small moan of bliss at the taste, prompting James to laugh. This alone is worth the membership fee, he joked. But as they savored the sweet treat, a subtle vibration on James's phone stole his attention. He frowned, checking the screen. It's my father's assistant. She rarely calls me at night unless... He trailed off. Harper watched concern pinch his brow. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. He exhaled, hitting answer. After a few seconds of muffled conversation, he pressed the phone to his chest, voice tense. My father collapsed at home, he explained, struggling to stay calm. They're taking him to the hospital. Harper, I'm so sorry, but I might need to go. Her eyes widened with empathy. Of course, don't worry about me. Let's leave right now. She stood swiftly, motioning for the bill. James nodded, signaling for the waiter. Moments later, they were hurrying out of the restaurant, tension overshadowing the romantic buzz of the evening. In the car, James sat rigid, phone in hand, occasionally tapping to see if there were updates. You think it's serious? Harper ventured gently, covering his hand with hers. He glanced at her, voice muted by worry. "My father's had heart problems before. He's stubborn about not slowing down. This could be—" He didn't finish the sentence. She squeezed his hand in silent support. Upon arrival at the hospital, James walked Harper to the nearest curb. "I'll get you a ride home," he said hurriedly. "I need to check on him right away, but I'll call you as soon as I know something." She nodded, stepping closer. In the fluorescent glow of the hospital entrance, she saw genuine fear in his usually composed face. Without overthinking, she reached up to press a light kiss to his cheek. "Take care of him, James. I'll be waiting." His eyes flickered with gratitude and something deeper. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he disappeared through the sliding doors, heading to the reception desk. Harper stood there for a moment, letting the night air brush over her. The date, so promising and sweet, had ended in an abrupt rush of worry. She whispered a quiet prayer for James's father, feeling a newfound closeness to James's life. Whatever happened next, she knew she wanted to stand beside him. A few minutes later, a car pulled up, arranged by James with a single text. She climbed in, head spinning with the evening's events: the private rooftop meal, the heartfelt confessions, the hospital dash. It felt like she had glimpsed a grand tapestry of James's world. Some threads were gorgeous and inviting, others carried the weight of anxiety and family duty. When she finally arrived home, Lydia and Ben were asleep. Harper sat in the living room, phone in hand, glancing at it every few seconds. An hour passed, then 2. Tiredness weighed on her, yet she refused to go to bed. Just before midnight, the screen lit up. "James." She answered immediately. His voice sounded exhausted but steady. "He's stable now. The doctors want to keep him for observation. It was a mild heart attack, but it looks like he'll pull through. I'm still with him, just wanted you to know." Harper closed her eyes, relief washing over her. "I'm so glad. Is there anything you need?" He released a quiet sigh. "Just hearing your voice helps. Thank you for understanding tonight." Emotions surged in her chest. They spoke for a few more minutes. Soft words of comfort, promises to check in the following day. When the call ended, Harper felt that swirl of hope and anxiety. She already cared so deeply for this man and the fragile threads of his life. If tonight was any sign, stepping into his world meant emotional highs and lows she hadn't fully imagined. Still, as she finally crawled into bed, her thoughts lingered on the taste of crème brûlée they shared, the gentle way James had looked at her, the protective vow she'd seen in his eyes. This was no ordinary fling, and despite the fear in that realization, she clutched her phone to her chest, a faint smile on her face. They had chosen each other. Now they'd face whatever came next. Together. James didn't leave his father's hospital bedside for 2 days straight, grabbing only snatches of sleep in the cramped visitor chair. He'd endured enough boardroom battles to know stamina was essential. But watching his father lie attached to IV drips and monitors demanded a different kind of endurance, one laced with worry and regret. Though Robert Anderson's doctors confirmed it was a mild heart attack, they kept him under observation, warning that his stress levels and relentless schedule had to change if he wanted to avoid worse repercussions. As soon as Robert was lucid enough to speak in short bursts, he wasted no time directing questions about the company, about ongoing deals, much to the exasperation of both James and the medical staff. "You can't just power through this, Dad," James said softly on the second night. He'd coaxed his father into a brief walk down the hallway, both of them moving slowly past the hush of other patients' rooms. Robert's thinning silver hair and lined face seemed more vulnerable under the hospital's fluorescent lights. "The doctors want you to rest. Relax. Let me handle business for a while." Robert pressed his lips together, disliking the idea. "I built Anderson Investments from nothing," he murmured, breath slightly labored. "You and your mother used to roll your eyes at how hard I worked, but it was all for our family." The mention of James's mother, gone for years now, brought a fleeting melancholy. "I know," James replied, guiding him gently back to the room. "I'm not asking you to step away permanently. Just let me carry the weight until you recover. Please." Slipping back into bed with a reluctant sigh, Robert yielded, though his expression remained uncertain. "Fine, fine," he mumbled, adjusting the blankets. Then, darting a look at James, he added, "And you? You look exhausted. Are you sleeping at all?" James couldn't help a small laugh. "I'm managing. Better than you, apparently." He tried to keep the mood light, but a deeper tension pressed in his chest. This was the father who'd taught him everything: business acumen, the value of discipline. But James also felt a gulf between them, especially in personal matters. For all his father's generosity, Robert had always hovered in a realm of powerful acquaintances and high society dealings. James never saw him show interest in anything or anyone that didn't fit the Anderson mold. After settling Robert, James stepped into the hallway to check his phone. A text from Harper glowed on the screen. "How are you? Thinking of you and your dad." Just reading her words eased some of the tightness in his shoulders. He typed back quickly, "He's stable, thanks for asking. Miss you." Her reply arrived almost instantly. "Miss you too. Please eat something, okay? I worry." He smiled to himself. Such a simple gesture, yet it enveloped him with warmth. She was worried about his well-being, not the next deal or the bottom line. Maybe that was why he felt himself clinging to her presence. The next morning, James finally left the hospital for a short stint. He had promised his father he'd update the board on the immediate financial moves and reassure them that Robert was recuperating. The board meeting was routine, men and women in suits discussing expansions, market fluctuations, and potential new ventures. But James felt impatient, mind drifting back to the hospital. When the CFO asked him about an international partnership that required immediate capital, James found himself hesitating. Normally, he'd leap at the chance. Yet, memories of his father's stressed face flashed in his mind. "Let's table that decision until next quarter," he said, ignoring the surprised expressions around the table. "We shouldn't stretch ourselves too thin with Dad out of commission. Stability over aggression for now." A few eyebrows rose at his cautious approach. Robert Anderson was famed for bold expansions, but James held firm. He ended the meeting sooner than usual, skipping the typical post-session pleasantries to rush back to the hospital. That afternoon, while sitting by his father's bed, James mustered the courage to bring up the topic that had been simmering at the back of his mind. "Dad," he began carefully, "there's someone I'd like you to meet, once you're well enough. A friend of mine." He paused, waiting for a reaction. Robert's gaze flickered with mild curiosity. "A friend? You don't usually talk about friends." James exhaled, rubbing his neck. "I haven't had many I trusted, but this one's different." The older man's interest piqued. "Is she the reason those gossip pages are buzzing about you in a diner?" His tone was neutral, but James sensed the undercurrent. Robert had likely heard staff or business associates whispering rumors, or maybe glimpsed an article himself. James shrugged lightly. "Yes, she works at a diner. Her name is Harper. She's incredible. Just not part of our usual circles, if that's what you're wondering." Robert looked at him for a long moment. "Are you serious about her?" James nodded without hesitation. "Yes, very." Silence swelled. Robert's features revealed neither overt disapproval nor warmth. "Well," he said finally, "I'd be lying if I said I never expected you to settle down with someone from our world, somebody who understands the intricacies of wealth and power. It's no small burden." He coughed, reaching for a sip of water. "But you're a grown man, James. You'll choose who you wish. Just be prepared for what that choice entails." James braced for more pushback. Robert's subdued acceptance surprised him. "It's not about ignoring the burdens," James replied softly. "It's about finding someone genuine, who sees me, not the money." He didn't mention that Harper already understood the paparazzi fiasco. He didn't mention how she'd never once asked him for a single favor. He hoped in time his father would see Harper's worth as clearly as he did. That evening, after Robert dozed off, James slipped out to call Harper again. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey," she greeted, voice bright. "How's your dad?" "Better," James said. "They might release him in a few days if he promises to rest. No guarantee he'll listen," he added with a rueful chuckle. They talked for a while about Robert's condition, about Lydia's upcoming school project, about the diner's day-to-day calm. Then Harper hesitated. "I'm not pushing, but do you think your dad will be okay with us? I know he's important to you." James leaned against the corridor wall, heart twisting. "Dad's complicated," he admitted, "but he's not a monster. He just wants me to be safe and successful. I think as long as I'm happy and not jeopardizing the company's future, he'll come around." He swallowed, recalling the look on Robert's face. "He didn't forbid it. That's already more than I expected." Harper murmured thoughtfully. "I guess we'll see." She paused. "If it ever becomes too much, the media, your father, your circle, tell me, okay? I don't want you carrying that pressure alone." A soft warmth flooded James's chest. Every time she spoke, he was reminded of her quiet strength. "I promise," he said, "but I'd rather carry it with you than without you." The day of Robert's discharge arrived. After final checkups, the doctors gave him a list of strict instructions: light exercise, a balanced diet, reduced stress. James arranged a home nurse just to ensure his father had support, though Robert grumbled about being babysat. The moment they stepped outside, a few photographers, no doubt tipped off, snapped pictures of Robert leaving in a wheelchair. James shielded his father, ushering him to the waiting car. The older man scowled but said nothing. He understood the unstoppable nature of tabloids by now. Once home, Robert settled into a recliner, eyeing the new nurse with mild suspicion. James, hovering, offered to handle any office calls or urgent matters. The rest of the day was quiet. No business, no drama, just a father and son reacquainting themselves with domestic routines. Robert napped intermittently, drifting in and out. Each time he roused, James would gently remind him that everything at the company was under control. Late in the afternoon, James's phone buzzed. Harper again. "Hey, hope your dad's okay. Could I bring dinner by?" James blinked at the message. She was volunteering to come to the Anderson estate, the domain that might intimidate most people. With a grateful smile, he typed back, "If you're sure. Dad might be asleep, but I'd love to see you." Within an hour, she arrived at the imposing gates of the Anderson property, carrying a container of homemade soup and a loaf of bread. The security guard, receiving James's nod, waved her through. Nervous flutters darted in Harper's stomach as she drove along the winding driveway flanked by manicured hedges. The mansion loomed, stately and grand, not excessively flashy but unmistakably opulent. She parked near the front steps, heart pounding. James met her at the door, face lit with gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. She shrugged, smiling. "Soup helps with healing. And I wanted to see you both if he's up for it." He led her inside, where echoes of footsteps on marble and the hush of thick carpeting created a museum-like atmosphere. Original paintings, ornate vases, subtle but luxurious decor. Harper resisted the urge to gape. She'd never been in a home that seemed part gallery, part palace. Yet she noticed personal touches, too. Old photos of James as a child, family portraits. It was a home, not just a showpiece. They found Robert in a cozy sunroom dozing under a light blanket. James touched his father's shoulder gently. "Dad?" Robert's eyes fluttered open. A faint curiosity shone in them when he saw Harper at James's side. She offered a polite smile, holding up the container. "Hello, Mr. Anderson. I'm Harper. I heard you were under the weather, so I brought soup if you're hungry." Robert looked her over. No trace of open disapproval, but a guarded curiosity. "Harper," he repeated, nodding faintly. Then, in a half-gruff, half-civil tone, "Thank you for going to the trouble, Miss Harper. That's kind of you." Harper smiled, stepping forward. "It's nothing special, just chicken and vegetables, but it's fresh. Let me know if you need anything else." Robert blinked, seeming uncertain how to respond to such a genuine gesture. James pitched in, guiding Harper to place the soup on a small table. "Smells good," Robert admitted at last. "I'll try some later." Satisfied he'd at least accept it, Harper turned to James with a small grin. "See? One step at a time." A moment later, a hush fell in the sunroom. Robert studied her again, taking in her modest clothes, her polite demeanor, the genuine concern in her eyes. He cleared his throat. "You work at that diner James used to frequent, right?" "Yes," Harper answered, glancing briefly at James. "Bluebell. It's small, but I like it. I manage a few shifts a week while taking college classes." Robert's features relaxed a fraction. "College? Which one?" Harper explained she attended a nearby community college part-time, hoping to transfer eventually. She kept it concise, not wanting to sound defensive. Robert listened, occasionally nodding, though he still appeared somewhat reserved. Eventually he shifted in his chair, grimacing slightly from his weakened condition. "Well, I appreciate your visit," he said, not quite effusive but not dismissive either. "I'm still tired, so if you'll excuse me." James gave Harper a small, understanding smile, silently communicating that his father needed rest. She nodded quickly. "Of course. Glad to have met you. Please get better soon." They exited the sunroom, leaving Robert to drift off again. Once in the hallway, James gently took Harper's hand. "Thank you," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "It means a lot that you came by, and I think it helped break the ice." She squeezed his fingers, eyes flicking around at the grandeur of the mansion. "It's a world away from my place," she said softly, a mix of awe and trepidation. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, but you belong here as much as anyone," he murmured, leaning in for a tender kiss. She closed her eyes, allowing that sweet contact to anchor her in the unfamiliar setting. After a moment they parted, and James led her to a sitting area, where a broad window offered a view of the estate grounds. "I don't want you feeling out of place," he said earnestly. "If there's ever anything that overwhelms you, my father, the house, the press, please tell me. I'm learning to navigate this too, you know." Harper nodded, glancing at the opulent surroundings again. "I will, thank you. And remember, same goes for you. If business pressures or your father's expectations get too heavy, lean on me, okay?" He didn't respond with words, just pulled her close for a warm embrace. The quiet of the house and the hush of the late afternoon sun seemed to cradle them in a bubble of calm. At length, she murmured, "I should probably head home soon. Lydia and Ben will worry." He walked her to the foyer, where they paused once more. "Let me know when you get home safe," he said, a hint of reluctance to see her go. "I will," she promised, offering a final smile. She left, winding through the mansion's corridors, down the front steps, and out to her car. Once behind the wheel, she exhaled, letting the surreal nature of the visit sink in. She'd been inside the Anderson estate, met the legendary Robert Anderson. This path she and James had chosen felt enormous, the stakes high, but in her heart, she believed it was worth it. Inside, James returned to the sunroom to check on his father, found him awake again, eyes flicking to the hallway where Harper had left. Robert's expression was unreadable. "She seems genuine," he said quietly, as if that in itself were a rare trait. James's heart warmed. "She is," he replied, voice firm yet gentle. "The real deal." For a moment, father and son simply exchanged a contemplative look. Perhaps Robert saw the reflection of a younger version of himself in James, someone unstoppable in pursuit of what he wanted. James could only hope that in time Robert would come to admire Harper, not just tolerate her. But for now, it was enough that he hadn't objected outright. They sat together in silence, the tension of the day slowly ebbing, with the lingering aroma of homemade chicken soup in the air. Outside, the last rays of sunshine touched the estate's gardens, painting them in golden light, a quiet reminder of fleeting moments and the promise of new beginnings. Harper woke at dawn, her mind still spinning from the previous evening at the Anderson estate. Even after a restless sleep, her heart was light with the memory of James's gentle kiss in that grand hallway. She rose quietly, not wanting to disturb Lydia or Ben, and spent a few extra minutes in the kitchen brewing coffee, reflecting on how her life had shifted so drastically in the past month. Not long ago, she had been on the brink of eviction, juggling 2 shifts and an endless pile of bills. Now, she was dating a man who came from a world she never imagined touching, a man who, by all signs, truly cared for her. She still worried about the chasm between their backgrounds, but each time they talked, that gap felt a little smaller. While sipping her coffee, Harper scrolled through her phone and paused on social media. There was a mention of James in a business article, something about stepping up while his father recovered. It was strange seeing him referenced in a formal capacity as James D. Anderson, CEO of Anderson Investments, when she knew him simply as James, the man who teased her about her homemade pie and listened to her fret over her siblings. The realization gave her a small thrill, but overshadowing that thrill was the knowledge of how easily tabloids could twist things around. Still, the paparazzi had gone mostly silent. Their fixation on the diner waitress scandal had fizzled, replaced by other celebrity stories. Even the trickle of phone calls to the diner had dried up. Harper allowed herself a measure of optimism that her life could return to normal, if something about dating a billionaire could ever be called normal. She took an early shift at Bluebell that day, greeting regulars with a warm smile. Around mid-morning, Pete, the diner owner, pulled her aside. "Everything calm at home now, kid?" he asked, his gruff tone disguising genuine concern. "Yeah, calmer," Harper confirmed, drying her hands on her apron. "James's father is back home from the hospital, so that's a relief, and the photographers seem to have moved on." Pete nodded, hooking a thumb at the quiet street beyond the windows. "Just a matter of time. They chase the next juicy headline. Let's hope it stays quiet." He eyed her carefully. "You still sure about him? That world can chew people up." Harper's cheeks warmed. "I'm sure," she said softly. "He's good to me, Pete, and to my family. I know it's a lot, but I trust him." Pete shrugged, returning to the grill. "All right, kid, just watch your back." By early afternoon, Harper's shift ended. She had a couple of hours before her next college class, so she hopped on a bus, heading to the campus library to work on a research paper for her hospitality course. Balancing school, job, and family was still tough, but the relief of not having to scramble for rent money let her focus a bit more on her future ambitions. She daydreamed about opening a cozy cafe, one with homemade desserts and a welcoming vibe. Maybe in a year or two once she finished her courses. But that dream was still a distant star. Her phone buzzed just as she neared the library steps. "James. Hey, how about dinner tonight? Dad's stable, and I'd love to see you. Maybe somewhere simpler this time?" She grinned at the screen, feeling a rush of warmth. He remembered how out of place she'd felt at that fancy rooftop, even though it was wonderful. She typed back, "I'd love that. Pick the place. I'm out of class by 7. He answered instantly, "Perfect. I have an idea. We'll text you location." Harper tucked the phone away, a quiet smile lingering. That evening, Lydia and Ben were fed and settled at home before Harper slipped out again. She wore a comfortable blouse and jeans, nothing flashy, but she'd brushed her hair carefully and applied a bit of lip gloss. James's text led her to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant on the Lower East Side, well known for its homemade pasta and laid-back atmosphere. Exactly her style. She stepped inside, scanning the modest tables draped in checkered cloth. James rose from a corner booth, waving her over with that gentle, confident presence she found so reassuring. "Hope you're okay with casual," he joked as she approached. "I've heard this is some of the best pasta in the city, so I thought we'd give it a try." Harper set her purse down, sliding into the booth across from him. "I love it already," she replied. The warm air smelled of tomato sauce and fresh basil. Around them, cheerful chatter filled the cozy space. No paparazzi, no hush of exclusivity, just normal people enjoying good food. They ordered quickly, a shared plate of bruschetta, a big bowl of spaghetti carbonara for Harper, and a hearty lasagna for James. After the waiter left, James leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "So, how was your day?" Harper told him about her shift at the diner, how one of her regulars joked that he missed seeing that fancy guy, referencing James. She also mentioned the research paper she was struggling with and asked about his father's progress. James rubbed his forehead, an edge of worry in his expression. Well, physically he's improving, but emotionally, I think he's frustrated. He doesn't want to slow down. I've been running the company in his stead, but he checks on me every 5 minutes with calls or messages. It's like he can't let go." Harper reached across the table, gently clasping his hand. "He's built his life around that business. Letting go, even temporarily, must feel scary to him. But you can handle it, James. You're more than capable." He squeezed her fingers, his eyes reflecting gratitude. "Some days I believe that, other days I'm not so sure." Then his tone shifted, growing softer. "But having you in my life, it helps. A lot." Their food arrived soon after, steaming plates of sauce and cheese. They ate in comfortable harmony, savoring bites and trading forks to taste each other's orders. Midway through the meal, James chuckled as he dabbed sauce from the corner of her lip with a napkin. "Delicious, right?" She laughed, not at all embarrassed by the gesture. "The best. Next time we need to bring takeout for your dad," she teased. "Who knows? Maybe real comfort food will do him good." James nodded, serious undertones creeping back into his voice. "I think he liked your soup, even if he didn't say much. I'd like to bring you by more often, if that's okay. Maybe once he's stronger we can all have dinner together." Harper paused, the fork halfway to her mouth. The idea of a proper family meal in that grand estate reminded her of the differences in their worlds. But the memory of Robert's cautious but polite acceptance also lingered. "I'd like that," she said, quiet but firm, "as long as you're sure he's comfortable with it." James gave a small shrug. "He needs to see us together. See how real this is. I'm not ashamed of any part of you, Harper, and I don't want him seeing you as a passing fancy. So yes, I think it's important." Warmth spread in her chest at those words. She realized that part of her had feared his father might push him to dismiss their relationship, push him to marry some society girl. But James seemed resolute about forging his own path. "Thank you," she whispered, focusing on her plate to hide the emotion in her eyes. They finished the meal with a shared tiramisu, exchanging little sighs of contentment with each spoonful. When the check arrived, Harper insisted on paying her half, though James teased that he was used to covering everything. She fixed him with a playful glare. "I won't let you buy my independence," she quipped, though her smile was affectionate. He gave in, acknowledging she wanted to keep things balanced, even if his wealth made that balance skewed at times. Walking out into the cool night, they linked arms. The sidewalk bustled with people leaving bars and restaurants. A street musician played a soft melody on guitar, and they paused to listen, dropping a few dollars into his case. Harper leaned her head on James's shoulder briefly, eyes closed, absorbing the moment. No cameras, no glaring spotlights, just two people who cared about each other in a big city. Out of habit, James scanned the area, ensuring no paparazzi lurked. Old caution flared, but he saw nothing suspicious. Turning back to Harper, he kissed her temple gently. "Where to now? I can drive you home, or we can walk a bit longer." She looked up at him. "Let's walk," she decided on a whim, craving a few more minutes of normalcy and closeness. They strolled several blocks, weaving past neon signs and late-night coffee shops. The city's energy pulsed, but they felt cocooned in their own sphere. They paused at a small playground, deserted at this hour, and perched side by side on a swing set. Harper pushed off lightly, letting the swing rock her back and forth while James kept his feet on the ground, turning to face her. She giggled at the silliness of swinging in the dark, wearing decent clothes, but it reminded her of simpler times, childhood, small joys. James studied her with a thoughtful tilt of his head. "I love that you don't need extravagance to enjoy a moment," he murmured. She shrugged with a soft grin. "Extravagance is nice, but so is this." She reached out and twined her fingers with his. "I don't need fancy restaurants to feel special. Sitting on a swing with you is more than enough." Something in her tone made him exhale deeply, as though letting go of an old tension. He scooted his swing closer, the chains rattling. "Harper, I can't promise our road will be smooth. You've seen how the media can invade. And my father, he's supportive enough, but there might be bigger challenges if we go public about us." She nodded, searching his eyes. "I understand, but I also know that my siblings and I owe you so much already, from the rent situation to just being there for us. I'm not going to run at the first sign of trouble." His face softened. "I don't want you feeling indebted. I helped because I wanted to, not because I expect anything in return." He paused, eyes turning serious. "In fact, I've been thinking about your dream. Your cafe. If you'd ever want a partner in that, I'd be honored." Her heart thudded, excitement and trepidation mingling. "Partner how?" He squeezed her hand. "Investing. Maybe not right away since you want to finish school, but once you're ready, I'd love to help you get it off the ground. Only if you want me to." Emotion swelled in her throat. Owning a cafe had seemed a distant fantasy, something that would take years of saving and possibly a bank loan she'd never qualify for alone. Yet here was James, offering a straightforward path. She blinked away the moisture in her eyes. That's an amazing offer, but I don't want you to feel you have to fix everything for me." "I don't," he said gently. "I just believe in you, in your talent and passion. You're determined. With or without me, you'd probably succeed one day, but maybe together we could make it happen sooner." She gave a shaky smile, overwhelmed in the best way. "Let me think on it. I promise I will." She wasn't ready to jump into such a big commitment, but the thought alone made her chest flutter with gratitude and pride. They sat there for a while, swinging gently, speaking of the future like it was a shared secret. Maybe they'd face the disapproval of high society or more invasive reporters, but in that moment, beneath the glow of a street lamp and the hush of the city's nighttime hum, they felt certain about each other. Eventually, the cool breeze stirred them to leave. James insisted on walking her back to her apartment building, stopping just outside the door. He glanced up at the lit windows, likely where Lydia and Ben were watching TV or finishing homework. Harper turned to him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Thank you for tonight," she whispered, leaning in. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. Their kiss was tender and unhurried, each trying to convey the depth of a bond still forming, yet already profound. When they broke apart, Harper's cheeks glowed, her breath slightly unsteady. "I'll text you in the morning," James promised. "Sweet dreams." She nodded, stepping inside, feeling her pulse drumming with exhilaration. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she realized that for once she wasn't worrying about overdue bills or how to keep her siblings afloat. Hope stirred at the thought of something more, of building a life with James even if it took years to shape. Meanwhile, James lingered on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, replaying every second of that last kiss. His father's advice, the paparazzi fiasco, the demands of a multi-million-dollar enterprise, none of it held sway in that moment. All that mattered was that Harper was his anchor, reminding him of life's simplest joys. After a final glance up at her window, he headed to his own car, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought, so long as Harper remained the bright promise at his side. Late Friday afternoon, James found himself pacing in the living room of the Anderson estate, wrestling with a strange blend of nerves and anticipation. He'd invited Harper and her younger siblings, Lydia and Ben, for a casual weekend visit. After weeks of juggling school and Harper's shifts at Blue Bell, they finally had an open day that lined up with James's schedule. Initially, James worried it might be overwhelming for her family. Stepping into the mansion was a far cry from their modest apartment. But Harper had texted earlier saying the kids were excited. Even Lydia, at her age, found the idea of exploring a real-life fancy house intriguing. Glancing out the bay window, James let out a tight breath. He'd arranged for a simple dinner in the sunny back garden, nothing ostentatious, just grilled chicken, fresh salads, and homemade lemonade. He wanted the kids to feel at ease. His father, Robert, was resting upstairs, still under doctor's orders for a low-stress routine, but he'd promised to make a brief appearance if he felt well enough. A knock at the door jolted James from his thoughts. He hurried to answer, greeting Harper and her siblings with a welcoming smile. They stood on the wide front steps, taking in the grand columns and ornate doors. Ben, eyes wide with boyish curiosity, gripped a small backpack. Lydia clutched her phone, discreetly snapping a couple of photos as if she'd stepped onto a movie set. "Hey," Harper said, stepping forward. She wore a comfortable sundress, her hair pinned up to keep cool in the late spring warmth. "We're not too early, are we?" "Not at all," James replied, ushering them inside. "Come on in. I've got drinks and snacks in the garden. Figured we'd hang out before dinner." As they entered the foyer, the siblings gawked at the vaulted ceilings and the gleaming marble floor. Ben mouthed a silent wow. Lydia's eyes flickered to the massive chandelier overhead. "Dude, this is big," Ben blurted, looking at James with a mix of awe and embarrassment. "You live here like all the time?" James chuckled. "All the time. Although I'm gone a lot for work, I know it's kind of over the top." Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut in. Robert Anderson, leaning carefully on a cane as he descended the staircase. His pale complexion and slightly unsteady gait revealed he was still recovering, but a polite smile hovered on his lips. "Welcome," he said, voice low. "James mentioned we'd have guests today." Harper's back straightened, a touch of nerves creeping in. Still, she stepped forward politely. "Hello again, Mr. Anderson," she said. "These are my siblings, Lydia and Ben." Lydia, momentarily forgetting her teen aloofness, managed a polite nod. "Hi," she said softly, eyes darting to the cane. "I hope you're feeling better." Robert inclined his head. "Better every day." He studied the kids with a reserved but not unfriendly expression. Then he added, "Don't let me keep you. I'll rest, but maybe join you all for dinner in a while." James caught his father's gaze, silently acknowledging the effort Robert was making. The older man, despite his cautious nature, was extending a small bridge of warmth toward Harper's family. "Thanks, Dad," James said, gently guiding Harper and the siblings down a hallway. "The garden is this way." They emerged onto a spacious patio that opened to manicured lawns, blooming flower beds, and a fountain trickling softly. A round table had been set up under a pergola draped in climbing roses, with glasses of lemonade already waiting. Lydia exhaled in wonder. "This is so pretty," she murmured, drawing out her phone for more photos. Ben raced over to the fountain, peering at the fish swimming inside. Harper stepped around the table, smiling at James. "You really went all out, huh?" He shrugged, a bit self-conscious. "It's just the backyard. I asked the staff to keep it low-key." They settled at the table, sipping lemonade while Ben pointed out the fountain's koi fish and Lydia quizzed James about living in such an expansive place. "How do you find anything here?" she asked, only half joking. "I mean, do you just keep, losing stuff?" James laughed, shaking his head. "Well, we have staff who help with housekeeping. But yeah, sometimes I forget which room I left something in." Ben sidled back, eyes glowing. "Are we allowed to explore? Just the garden area?" Harper shot him a warning look. She didn't want to overstep, but James waved it off. "Of course you can explore. There's a maze-like hedge on the far side, a greenhouse, and a small orchard of fruit trees. Just don't wander too far without letting us know, okay?" The boy nodded vigorously, glancing at Harper for permission. She smiled softly. "Stay where we can find you," she said, watching as Ben hurried off, enthralled by the vast grounds. Lydia shrugged and followed at a more measured pace, phone in hand. With the teenagers momentarily occupied, Harper and James were left alone at the table. A light breeze rustled the roses overhead, petals drifting down in a lazy swirl. Harper leaned over, lightly brushing her hand over James's. "Thank you," she said in a low voice. "They're thrilled. I can't believe how gracious your father was, even for a moment." James's gaze flicked to the house where Robert had retreated. "He's trying," he replied. "He's proud, set in his ways, but I think seeing you show kindness, like that soup you brought, softened him a bit." Harper felt relief swirl in her chest. She'd been bracing for coldness or polite distance from Robert. While his greeting was brief, it hadn't been hostile. "That means a lot," she murmured. They talked quietly about her classes, James's latest dealings with the board, and how she was juggling final exams. Occasionally, they cast an eye over the lawn to check on Lydia and Ben, who were now marveling at the greenhouse's exotic plants. After a bit, James stood. "Let's take a walk?" She nodded, and they strolled onto a stone pathway weaving around the lawn, stepping carefully to avoid the sprinklers that watered the flower beds. James pointed out the orchard in the distance, explaining that as a child he used to climb the apple trees while nannies scolded him from below. "Dad was always busy with meetings, so I'd amuse myself. Didn't matter how big the house was, kids find a way to have fun." Harper squeezed his arm. "Bet you have plenty of memories tied to these gardens." He nodded, momentarily thoughtful. "Some good, some lonely. But it's nice to see kids running around here again. I guess, in some ways, it reminds me what it felt like to be a child, exploring with wide-eyed wonder." They continued around a manicured hedge until they spotted Lydia taking selfies near a cluster of vibrant red roses. Ben was attempting to hide behind them in some sort of impromptu game of tag. The sight made Harper grin. She waved them over, and soon they were all congregated near a small bench, marveling at the array of blooming flowers. "All right," James said, checking his watch. "Ready for dinner? Cook should have everything prepared by now. We'll eat on the patio so Dad can join if he's up for it." Ben and Lydia nodded eagerly. They made their way back, drawn by the mouth-watering aromas coming from the grill station at the edge of the terrace. A staff member, Connie, who handled much of the Andersons' kitchen work, offered a warm greeting and laid out plates of grilled chicken, seasoned potatoes, and grilled vegetables. A side bowl of freshly tossed salad glistened with dressing. "This looks amazing," Lydia sighed, eyes large. Ben wasted no time loading his plate while Harper took a more modest portion, ensuring the kids got what they wanted first. They settled around the table, conversation light and relaxed. Every so often, Ben would exclaim about a particular spice or marinade, and Connie, smiling from a distance, would call out the recipe details. James watched with quiet satisfaction, as though seeing this gathering unfold was a wish he'd long held. Midway through the meal, the sound of footsteps on the patio drew their attention. Robert appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane but looking steadier than before. "Mind if I join?" he asked, voice gruff with underlying fatigue. James stood quickly, helping guide his father to a seat. Harper folded her napkin and offered a polite smile. "We'd be happy to have you," she said. Robert settled into a chair, exhaling. He glanced at the spread of food. "Smells good. Perhaps I'll have a bit." He served himself modestly, while the table conversation picked up again. Lydia impressed him by asking thoughtful questions about the mansion's architecture gleaned from pictures she'd seen. Ben shyly asked if he could see the library at some point. Robert, though reserved, answered with a few details. The library contained old family volumes, some dating back a century, and yes, the kids could see it under supervision. As the conversation flowed, Harper caught Robert studying her siblings. She wondered what he thought of them. Two normal teenagers who lacked the grooming of high society but were clearly bright and polite. In the older man's gaze, Harper sensed a mix of curiosity and acceptance, maybe even a hint of wistfulness. After dinner, Connie emerged with a tray of homemade apple tarts. The sweet aroma flooded the patio, and Lydia's eyes lit up. "I've never had anything like this," she confessed, taking a small spoonful. "Wow, it's so fresh." Ben mumbled agreement through a mouthful, prompting laughter around the table. As they finished dessert, Robert stood, indicating he needed to lie down again. Before he left, he turned to Harper and her siblings. "Thank you for visiting. You're welcome here any time," he said, nodding at James. "Don't let him bury himself in work." Harper smiled warmly. "We'll do our best," she replied. Lydia and Ben chimed in with soft goodbyes. Once Robert had gone, James let out a long breath, looking almost relieved. "That's probably the most social interaction Dad's had in weeks." Harper touched his arm. "He's trying, James. And so are we." They lingered outside a bit longer, letting the evening air cool them. Lydia snapped a final round of photos for her social media, though Harper reminded her not to tag anything that might draw unwanted attention. Ben, head resting on the table, was fighting a dozy contentment from the hearty meal. Eventually they stood to leave, not wanting to overstay. James walked them to their car at the front, where the kids thanked him repeatedly for the meal and the garden adventure. "You're both welcome any time," James repeated, patting Ben on the shoulder. "We'll have to explore the orchard next time. There's a treehouse hidden away." Ben's eyes went round. "No way! That's so cool!" Lydia nodded in agreement, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Thanks, James. It was really nice meeting your dad again, too." He smiled, ruffling the boy's hair in a brotherly gesture before turning to Harper. She looked at him with gratitude shining in her eyes. "That went so well," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting them see a piece of your life. They loved it." He closed the distance, brushing a soft kiss against her cheek. "I loved having them here. And you," he murmured, voice sincere. "I want my home to feel like your home, too, even if it takes time to get used to it." A flutter stirred in her chest at those words, heavy with implication. She pressed her forehead to his for a moment, whispering, "We'll find our way." The kids watched, smirking in that teenage way, but neither teased. It felt almost natural to them now, Harper and James, two worlds merging at the dinner table, forging new traditions. As they pulled away in the car, James stood on the driveway, hands tucked in his pockets, a contemplative smile curving his lips. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, Harper saw his figure framed by the grand facade of the estate. She couldn't help wondering if, bit by bit, they were creating a bridge between that mansion and her small apartment, bridging not just physical distance but social and emotional barriers. With each new step, family dinners, relaxed gardens, Robert's guarded acceptance, they inched closer to proving that their love could transcend every difference. And for the first time in a long while, Harper believed wholeheartedly that they might just succeed. The following weeks brought a gentle rhythm that both Harper and James found surprisingly comforting. Harper would juggle her classes, help Lydia and Ben with homework, and manage shifts at Bluebell Diner. James rotated between intense days at Anderson Investments, stepping up as interim head while his father recovered, and quieter evenings where he'd sneak away to meet Harper for dinner or a simple walk by the riverside. Occasionally, Harper would bring the kids by the estate for a Saturday visit, playing with the koi fish in the fountain or wandering through the orchard. Robert, still frail but growing stronger, watched their interactions from a cautious distance. He would sometimes join them for lunch, calmly observing how Lydia's curiosity led her to ask about the mansion's history, or how Ben's excitement guided him to explore every corner of the garden. Slowly, the barriers between the two families began to dissolve. One late afternoon, Robert summoned James to his study, a dignified wood-paneled room filled with old books and the faint aroma of leather. James arrived to see his father sitting behind the large oak desk, still looking pale but resolute. "Close the door," Robert said, gesturing at the armchair opposite. "I want to talk about the future of this family." Nerves fluttered in James's chest. He complied, taking a seat. The last time they'd had a private talk in this study was months ago, when Robert criticized James for not pursuing a more suitable partner, a wealthy heiress from an influential family. But tonight, the older man's expression seemed less confrontational. "How's your health?" James ventured, trying to read his father's mood. Robert waved a hand dismissively. "Better. Doctor says I'll be able to resume a light schedule soon, but that's not our main concern." He leaned forward, folding his hands. "I've observed your relationship with Harper these past weeks, met her siblings. I see how they've grown comfortable here." James's heart pounded. He braced for disapproval. "Yes, they're good kids, Dad, and Harper is amazing with them. You've seen it." A subtle nod. "Yes, I have. And with you." Robert paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You've always been a solitary figure, James, focused on work. I've never seen you so content. It's a relief, even if it's not what I once envisioned." James relaxed slightly, but the mention of "what I once envisioned" reminded him that Robert had previously expected him to marry someone from their social circle. "Dad, I know you wanted me to align with another powerful family, but Robert raised a hand, stopping him. "I'm not going to force that. Look, I won't pretend I fully understand your connection with this young woman from a completely different life. But you're my son. My only son. If Harper truly makes you happy, I won't stand in your way." A tide of relief coursed through James. He hadn't realized how much tension he'd carried, fearing his father's outright objection. "Thank you," he said softly. "I appreciate that more than you know." Robert exhaled, letting the moment settle. Then, with the faintest smile, he continued, "But I do want you both to be prepared. Our world is not kind to outsiders. There will be skepticism. Some might even attempt to use her background as a weapon to question your leadership or your judgment." "I understand." James frowned, thinking of how the tabloids had spun Harper's story once before. "We'll handle it." His father's gaze drifted toward the window, where the evening light cast shadows on the manicured lawns. "We have to be mindful of how the board perceives you, especially now that I'm stepping back. This is a crucial time for the company." James nodded. "I realize that. I'm consolidating some projects to avoid overreach, making sure we stay stable instead of chasing every risky expansion. So far, the board seems supportive." Robert's lips twitched in a half-smile. "You're learning to be practical, not just aggressive." "Good." He looked back at James. "In a few months, we'll likely hold a shareholders' meeting, our biggest in years given our transition. I want you prepared to stand before them as the face of Anderson Investments, and I suspect they'll want to know about your personal life. They always do." James let out a breath, an uneasy feeling creeping in. The thought of standing in front of those old guard shareholders, many of whom were family friends or wealthy investors with strong opinions, made him tense. "I'll be ready," he replied, voice steady. And Harper will be too if she chooses to stand by my side. I won't force her into the spotlight. Robert nodded. Well, at least she's proven she's not after your money. She's never asked us for a cent. He paused. I appreciate that in a way. Warmth flooded James's chest. He saw the faint acceptance in his father's eyes, the reluctant admiration for a woman who wasn't from their high society but carried herself with dignity. She's proud and independent, James said quietly. That's why she's the one. Robert said nothing more, only studied his son for a long moment. Finally, he gathered himself, standing slowly with the help of his cane. I'll let you get back to your evening, James. Thank you for coming. James rose too, stepping forward. On impulse, he reached out and squeezed his father's shoulder gently. Dad, I'm proud of you too, for opening your mind to all this. Robert's eyes flickered with a hint of emotion he quickly masked. Good night, son. And with that, he limped away to rest. James remained by the desk, letting relief wash over him. He was one step closer to bridging the gap between two lives that once felt irreconcilable. It emboldened him to think about the next stage, truly inviting Harper into every aspect of his world. A week later, a new complication arose. Early one morning, James got a call from Sarah, his longtime personal assistant. Sir, I just received an email from a freelance reporter, she said, voice strained. He claims to have information about Harper's family, something regarding her father's past debts. He's hinting at writing a piece unless we discuss terms. James stiffened. Terms? As in hush money? Sarah sighed. That's my guess. He didn't explicitly say, but he's fishing. This might be blackmail. He asked for a direct meeting with you. Anger flared inside James. He recalled Harper mentioning that her father had passed away years ago after an accident, leaving them with very little. If there were debts, it was news to him, and likely untrue or irrelevant. Still, tabloids would twist any detail. I won't meet with him, James snapped. Let me think. Where did he say he got this information? Nothing concrete. He only said he has sources. Could be nothing, a fabrication, or he might have half-truths. You know how these gossip vultures operate. James exhaled, pacing in his office. Let's not jump to conclusions. I'll talk to Harper first. She deserves to know if someone's digging into her family's past. That evening at Harper's apartment, she set out 2 cups of tea on the small dining table. James had arrived after work, tension evident in his posture. Lydia and Ben were in their rooms studying, so they had a moment of privacy. Harper studied James's expression. What's wrong? She asked gently, noticing how he ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of stress. He explained Sarah's call, summarizing the reporter's claims. Harper's face paled. My father didn't have any big debts that I know of, she said, voice trembling slightly. He lost his job before the accident, but that was it. We struggled, yeah, but nothing scandalous. That's just lies. James leaned forward, capturing her hands. I believe you. And even if there were debts, it's none of the world's business. But these reporters can twist anything to taint your image. She swallowed. So what do we do? He's fishing, hoping we'll pay to kill a story? Possibly. James frowned. I can ignore him, or I can have Sarah arrange a legal approach, letters threatening a lawsuit for defamation if he publishes unverified lies. But ignoring might let him spin his garbage. Handling it legally might provoke him more. I wanted your input. Harper stared at the steam rising from her teacup, heart pounding. I don't want to be the center of another scandal. My siblings... She shook her head, fear flickering in her eyes. They've finally relaxed, feeling safe after that earlier paparazzi mess. James nodded, anger building at how unscrupulous journalists preyed on normal families. Harper, I won't let him smear you or your family. If we stand united, we can face down this threat. Her eyes filled with a mix of relief and anxiety. I trust you. but I hate that you have to fight these battles because of me." He gently squeezed her hands again. "You're not the cause of the battles, the tabloids are. Don't ever blame yourself. Besides," he took a breath, voice softening, "you're worth it." A hint of a smile touched her lips, though tears shimmered. "Thank you. Let's do the legal approach. Warn him that if he publishes nonsense, we'll sue for defamation. Hopefully that scares him off." James agreed. "I'll have Sarah coordinate with our legal team tomorrow." They shared a quiet moment sipping tea, the tension slowly ebbing. Eventually, Harper leaned her head against his shoulder, allowing the comfort of his presence to seep in. If there was anything these trials had taught them, it was that they stood stronger together. By midweek, the legal letter had been sent to the reporter, aggressively demanding proof of his claims and warning of immediate legal action if he printed false allegations. The reporter's reply came swiftly, a sneering email stating that he had sufficient evidence but was willing to discuss an arrangement, in other words, blackmail under a veneer of negotiation. James bristled, reading the email in his office while Sarah hovered at his desk. "He's doubling down," James muttered. "No direct proof, just vague references and demands. Typical weasel tactic." Sarah pursed her lips. "Should we escalate? Perhaps file a preemptive legal motion so he knows we aren't bluffing?" James drummed his fingers on the desk, considering. "Yes, let's do that. I'll call our external counsel. If he tries to publish anything, we'll slam him with a lawsuit so severe he'll think twice." Sarah gave a small nod. "I'll prepare the documents." Once alone, James dialed Harper. She answered, voice tight. "Hey, any news?" He told her about the reporter's continuing threats. She sighed. "I hate this, James, but do whatever you have to. Maybe once he realizes we're serious, he'll back off." He paused, hearing the weariness in her tone. "Are you okay? Do you need me tonight?" She hesitated. "No, it's fine. I'm just stressed. Lydia's picking up on it, asking if we're in trouble again." A humorless laugh escaped her. "Feels like we can't get a break." James closed his eyes, pain tugging at him. "I'm sorry. I'll fix this. I promise." She drew a shaky breath. "I know you will. I just hate that it never ends." They said goodnight, both longing for simpler times. James remained in his chair, gazing out the tall windows of his office, where city lights glittered. The union between him and Harper had grown strong, but the outside world kept testing them, like a relentless tide pounding at a fragile shoreline. Yet, he reminded himself they weren't fragile anymore. They had weathered gossip, paparazzi, and disapproval from certain social circles. The difference now was that they faced these challenges as a team. If anything, each attack only solidified their resolve. The next day, James's legal team fired back another letter, more forceful. The tension soared as they awaited the reporter's move. But instead of an article or further blackmail, an abrupt silence fell. Days passed with no mention, no new scandal in the tabloids. It was as if the man had vanished. Sarah hypothesized he'd realized they were serious about litigation and chose to drop the scheme. Harper held her breath, praying it was truly over. Lydia and Ben returned to their routines, and Harper refocused on her final exams and helping Pete manage a minor staffing crisis at Blue Bell. James threw himself into board meetings and daily check-ins with Robert, who in turn was climbing back to health. One quiet evening, while Harper dozed on the couch after a long day, her phone buzzed. The unknown number gave her a jolt, but she answered. Only static greeted her. Then a male voice rasped, "You think you can scare me off forever? I'll find a bigger platform for my story." She shot upright, heart pounding. "Who is this?" A hollow chuckle. "You'll see soon enough." The line clicked dead, leaving her trembling. She sat in shock, the phone pressed to her ear long after the call ended. Wearily, she stood to double-check her front door locks, an old fear gripping her. It wasn't over, no matter what they'd hoped. She typed a quick text to James. "He just called me. Says he'll find a bigger platform. I'm scared." Then she braced herself, unsure whether her life was about to be thrown back into chaos. Within minutes, her phone buzzed. James's voice crackled through, grim but resolute. "I'm coming over." As she sank onto the sofa again, waiting for James, she closed her eyes. The hush of the apartment felt oppressive, a stark contrast to the swirling dread in her mind. Even if she wanted a quiet, ordinary life, it seemed that being with James meant standing against wave after wave of intrusion. Yet she knew in her core, stepping away from him wasn't an option. Their bond had become too precious, too genuine. They would face this threat together, just like they had all the others. Still, she couldn't deny the chill crawling up her spine. What if this was only the beginning of something worse? By the time James arrived at Harper's apartment building, the night sky had turned ink black, dotted with city lights. He dashed up the steps, ignoring his own fatigue after a grueling day at Anderson Investments. Harper buzzed him in, and he rushed down the hallway to find her apartment door already ajar. She stood just inside, eyes red-rimmed, arms folded protectively. The moment James entered, Harper all but sagged into him, letting out a shaky breath. He wrapped his arms around her, steadying them both. "I'm here," he murmured, holding her tight. In the dim glow of the living room lamp, he saw the fear in her face. Lydia and Ben, clad in pajamas, hovered anxiously in the background. Harper glanced at them, gesturing reassuringly. "It's okay, guys. Go to your rooms. I'll be fine. James is here." Ben hesitated as if wanting to say something, then nodded, leading Lydia to the short hallway that branched off to their bedrooms. Once the siblings disappeared, Harper exhaled. "I'm sorry. It's just—" He called from an unknown number, threatened to go to a bigger platform with his lies about my dad. "I feel like we're living in a nightmare again." James led her to the sofa, sitting down so she could rest against him. "You have nothing to apologize for," he assured her, voice firm but gentle. "This is harassment, plain and simple. I'll call the legal team again first thing in the morning. We'll expand the scope, maybe involve the police if needed." She stared at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm worried about the kids. If the tabloids plaster my family's name everywhere—" "They won't," James cut in, though he couldn't keep a note of anger from his tone. "Listen, we'll do whatever it takes to protect you and your siblings. If we need security, if we need to file harassment charges, I don't care. I'll handle it." A tear escaped Harper's eye. "I hate feeling helpless, that some stranger can just call and threaten me." She looked at James. "And I'm scared the more we push back, the more it'll escalate. These types love drama." He drew her closer, pressing his lips to her temple. "It might get worse before it gets better," he admitted, "but I promise you, we're in this together. The man's a coward. He's trying to profit off of intimidation." She closed her eyes, soaking in his warmth. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of leaning on him. She could sense the frustration coiled beneath his calm exterior. James was used to controlling his environment, commanding boardrooms, negotiating deals. But dealing with unscrupulous reporters who spun personal trauma for profit, this was an ugly side of the world he also despised. Eventually, James pulled out his phone, stepping into the kitchen to call a contact in the local police precinct, someone who had handled minor stalking cases for him before. Harper overheard fragments of the conversation. Phrases like, "anonymous harassment," "potential blackmail," "we have legal teams on standby." The sense of dread in her stomach lightened slightly, hearing James's unwavering tone. She remembered how, once upon a time, she faced eviction alone. Now she had a powerful ally who took her side wholeheartedly, not out of obligation, but out of love. When James finished, he rejoined her on the sofa, scanning the small living space. He'd been here many times, helped fix a wobbly cabinet once, shared dinner with Lydia and Ben. "I gave the police all the details," he told Harper softly. They can't guarantee they'll catch him right away, but we're on record now. If he tries anything beyond phone calls, we'll have a paper trail." Harper nodded, feeling a bit calmer. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'd go crazy if I had to deal with this alone." James placed a hand on her cheek, tilting her face to meet his gaze. "You'll never have to deal with it alone. Understand?" She leaned into his touch. "Yes." A mild shuffle from the hallway signaled Lydia approaching. The teen peeked around the corner. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice hushed. Harper forced a small, reassuring smile. "We're all right, Lyd. Just some annoying phone calls. Nothing you and Ben need to worry about, okay?" Lydia's brow furrowed, but she nodded slowly. "Okay, let me know if I can do anything." Then, with a protective glimmer in her eyes, she retreated to her room, shutting the door softly. James sighed, glancing around. "Why don't I stay tonight? I'll sleep on the couch if that makes you feel safer. The kids might rest easier too, knowing I'm here." Harper looked at the worn sofa and at James's tailored suit. "You have work in the morning, and this couch isn't exactly designed for comfort," she teased with a shaky laugh. He smiled, sliding an arm around her. "I've slept in worse places. It's worth it if it helps you feel more secure. Unless you'd rather—" "No," Harper murmured, the relief clear in her voice. "I'd like you to stay." They locked the front door securely. James texted Sarah to update her on the developments, promising to meet early to coordinate a response strategy. Then, by the dim lamp near the sofa, Harper and James finally settled. She fetched him a spare blanket and pillow. He kicked off his shoes and loosened his tie, easing into an awkward but protective arrangement. Before turning off the light, Harper crouched by the sofa. "James," she said softly, "thank you for everything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Any time." Leaning up, he placed a tender kiss on her forehead. She lingered, letting the moment reassure her, then switched off the lamp and made her way to the bedroom. That night, neither of them slept deeply. Harper's ears were primed for any ring of the phone. James's mind churned with legal counters and possible police action. But they dozed, the knowledge of each other's presence a comforting anchor. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee brewing and quiet chatter from Lydia and Ben, who had awakened to find James stretched out on the sofa, half asleep. They exchanged amused looks. This wasn't the first time James had spent the night in emergencies, but the novelty hadn't worn off. Harper emerged from her bedroom, hair tousled, looking worn but determined. She poured coffee into mugs, handing one to James, who gratefully accepted. He glanced at the kids, offering them a reassuring nod. "Hope I didn't scare you two last night," he said gently. Ben shook his head. "Nah, we're okay. Mom, Harper, explained it was just some crank call." He flushed, remembering the moment he almost called her Mom. She was more sister than mother, but sometimes his childlike vulnerability slipped through. Harper shot Ben a kind smile, then turned to James. "We'll handle this, right?" He took a sip of coffee, the caffeine jolting him awake. "Definitely." He checked his phone. "I'll head to the office soon and talk with our legal counsel. Then maybe we can meet for lunch or dinner. Keep each other updated." She nodded, the tension in her shoulders less visible in the daylight. Lydia handed Harper her phone. "We should keep it on silent if we go out, in case that creep calls again, right?" Harper considered. "I'd rather block unknown numbers, but what if he uses a new line each time?" She grimaced. "I might have to change my number altogether." James listened, jaw tight. "We can switch your number, sure. But let's hold off until we see if the police can trace him. We'll ask the phone company, too." Ben piped up. "We'll be okay, Harper. Don't worry." The boy's earnestness tugged at her heart. With a soft exhale, Harper nodded. "Yes, we will be, because we're all in this together." The rest of the day blurred in a flurry of calls. James spent hours at the Anderson Investments offices, conferring with lawyers who refined their strategy to file harassment reports and civil claims if the reporter's blackmail continued. Meanwhile, Harper did a shortened shift at Bluebell, uneasy every time the phone rang but trying to act normal for the customers. Around mid-afternoon, Pete, the diner owner, noticed her distraction. "Hey, kid, you okay? You keep jumping at every little noise." She forced a tight smile. "Just personal stuff. But it'll be fine." Pete studied her for a moment, then grunted a quiet affirmation. "All right, if you say so. But if you need time off to handle personal stuff, let me know. We can shuffle schedules." Her eyes stung with gratitude. "Thanks, Pete. I might do that if this doesn't settle soon." She left in the early evening, heading straight home to check on Lydia and Ben. The phone had remained silent, an ominous silence that could mean the blackmailer was biding his time. She tried to focus on everyday chores instead. That night, James came over again, though this time he went home around 11, after spending time chatting with Lydia about her upcoming painting project. No suspicious calls interrupted them, and Harper breathed a reluctant sigh of relief, half fearing it was the calm before a storm. Days trickled by. Harper and James fell into a watchful routine. He'd text or call frequently, verifying no new threats had emerged. The police had meager leads. The phone records offered little. The reporter's email address went dark. It was as if the blackmailer realized the risk of tangling with the Anderson legal machine and decided to lay low. One morning, Harper checked her phone upon waking. No new calls. She tiptoed to the living room, finding Lydia hurrying out the door for school and Ben rummaging for cereal. She felt her spirits rise slightly. Maybe they'd weathered the worst. But in the back of her mind, the memory of that hissed threat, "I'll find a bigger platform," kept echoing. She tried to shake it off, turning her attention to an upcoming exam in her hospitality class. That same afternoon, James invited her to a board meeting cocktail hour, an informal gathering where investors mingled with executives. The board wanted to congratulate James on smoothly overseeing the firm during Robert's recovery. He asked Harper, "Would you like to come? It's not a heavy, formal event, more of a networking thing, but if we show up together, it might quell rumors and show them I'm not hiding you away." Harper paused, heart thumping at the idea of stepping into a corporate environment. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause a stir." He gave her a reassuring smile. "You won't. I want them to meet you, see you for who you are. If you feel uncomfortable, we can leave early." Nerves fluttered in her stomach, but she agreed. She knew how crucial the board's opinion was, especially with Robert's partial retirement. So she donned a simple yet elegant black dress, minimal jewelry, and let Lydia style her hair. By early evening, James picked her up in a sleek car, confidence and pride radiating from him as he looked her over. "You look perfect," he said softly, pressing a kiss to her hand. She managed a small grin. "Let's hope the board thinks so." The cocktail event took place on the top floor of a downtown luxury hotel, the skyline glowing through massive windows. Inside, well-dressed men and women mingled, sipping champagne and discussing the latest market moves. James guided Harper around the room, politely introducing her as "my partner, Harper Morris." Some recognized her from the rumors months ago. Others offered polite nods. A few displayed mild surprise. But for the most part, people were courteous, if reserved. Harper's pulse thudded as she navigated small talk with strangers, referencing hedge funds and corporate expansions she barely understood. James remained by her side, gracefully bridging conversation gaps. She appreciated the subtle reassurance in his posture, hand lightly resting on her back, a gentle squeeze of her arm if he sensed her unease. Then, near the bar, they encountered a trio of older board members. One of them, a distinguished woman in a tailored suit, gave Harper a genuine smile. "I've heard so much about you, my dear. You've grounded James in a way we never could." Her tone was warm, and Harper felt a spark of gratitude. The man beside her, however, offered a tight-lipped expression. "Mr. Anderson," he said to James, "heard your father's on the mend. Good to see." And this must be Miss Morris? He eyed Harper with polite skepticism. What do you do again? Harper introduced herself, explaining briefly about the diner and her college studies in hospitality. The man raised an eyebrow, politely feigning interest. Hospitality, That's practical. James bristled, sensing the condescension. He flashed a smooth smile, though. Harper plans to open her own cafe someday. She's talented in running an efficient operation, which, quite frankly, is more than I can say for some of our acquisitions. Harper bit back a chuckle at his subtle dig. The board member cleared his throat, shifting. Indeed. Well, I suppose success can come from anywhere. He then excused himself, heading to another cluster of investors. Harper exhaled, half relieved. That went better than I feared, she murmured. James offered a conspiratorial grin. Trust me, that's mild for him. They continued circling the room, making small connections. By the end of the evening, Harper was both exhausted and proud of herself for surviving the corporate crowd. James discreetly led her to a quiet corner near the panoramic windows. You did great, he whispered, leaning in. Thank you for being here. She looked up into his eyes, her anxiety ebbing. Thank you for believing in me, not just leaving me at home. He brushed his lips softly over hers. Never. Their brief kiss ended when they noticed a camera flash from the other side of the room, likely a corporate photographer capturing the event. Harper tensed, but James smiled calmly. It's okay. Just the official event photos. Nothing tabloidy. She relaxed into his side, trusting him. No sign of the blackmailer. No malicious reporter lurking. Just the normal challenges of forging relationships in a high-powered world. Maybe they were truly in the clear. But as they left the event, stepping into the elevator, Harper's phone vibrated. She fished it out, eyebrows knitting when she saw an unknown number. Her heart lurched. James must have seen the alarm in her face. Do you want to answer? He asked, jaw taut. She swallowed hard. I'll put it on speaker. She tapped accept, bracing herself. A moment of static, then a voice, different from the rasp before, spoke calmly. Is this Harper Morris? Harper glanced at James, who nodded encouragement. Yes, she said, voice trembling. This is Derek Campbell, editor at the City View. We received a tip about your father's financial issues prior to his death, and I'd like your statement before we run a feature tomorrow. The elevator doors slid open, but James reached out to hold them so they wouldn't exit into the lobby. His eyes flared with anger. Harper's throat constricted. What tip? She forced out. Campbell's voice turned smooth, almost pitying. That your father owed significant amounts to private lenders, leaving your family in dire straits. Allegedly, you and your siblings have been living off charitable handouts from a certain billionaire. We want to confirm the accuracy before printing. Harper's pulse pounded in her ears. That's not. My father didn't have huge debts. And what does James Anderson have to do with it? We were never living off. Her voice shook with outrage. James's hand closed over hers. He said firmly into the phone, I'm James Anderson. We've had no official charity arrangement. This is personal. If you print falsehoods or insinuate wrongdoing, we'll consider it libel. A pause on the line. Mr. Anderson, we have documents. We'd prefer your side of the story. The piece is set to run tomorrow. Harper's heart sank. Another wave of half-truths contrived to smear her father's memory and paint her as a gold digger. James inhaled, controlling his fury. We demand proof of these claims immediately. Email them tonight. We'll have our lawyers review. If you can't verify them, we will sue the City View for defamation. Silence, then a clipped response. Very well, I'll send the files. But we're on deadline, so you have until morning to respond. The call ended, leaving them in a stunned hush. The elevator beeped insistently, its doors wide open to the lobby. James put an arm around Harper's shoulders, leading her out. She was visibly shaking. Another story, she breathed. They want to publish it tomorrow? He guided her to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, ignoring the curious eyes of other guests. We'll see what so-called documents they have, he said, voice tight. This time we'll fight back with everything. Harper clenched her fists. I can't believe they're trying to drag my dad's name through the mud. He died in an accident. We had enough heartbreak without this. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away, resolute. I won't let them tarnish our memories. James pulled her into a hug, a protective warmth cocooning her in the echoing marble space. We won't let them, I promise. Yet, an undercurrent of dread gnawed at him. If the blackmailer or some source had fabricated documents, the City View might still sensationalize it. Tomorrow the battle would intensify. They'd managed to hold the line against one unscrupulous reporter, but now a larger publication was in the mix. As they left the hotel, James arranged for a driver to take them to his penthouse, where they could hunker down with a secure internet connection, lawyers on standby, ready to dissect any evidence the editor emailed. This was no fleeting rumor. It was a full-fledged attempt to smear Harper's family and, by extension, undermine James's image. Sitting in the back seat of the car, Harper nestled against him, mind racing. She wasn't alone, but she felt battered by wave after wave of adversity. Every time she tried to step forward, her relationship with James blossoming, her siblings feeling safe, another assault hit. But as James clasped her hand, his expression resolute under the glow of passing streetlights, she gathered strength. This was what love meant, fighting side by side, even when the world tried to tear them down. Tomorrow would be a test of their resolve, and Harper silently vowed they would pass it, together. The next morning felt like the calm before a storm. Harper sat at the kitchen counter in James's penthouse, her heart thudding as she sipped coffee that tasted like dust. Dawn light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a city on the cusp of awakening. But Harper's thoughts were pinned on the impending publication by The City View. According to the editor's ominous phone call, an article slandering her father, and by extension her, was set to drop any minute unless they countered it. James paced the living area, phone glued to his ear. Nothing yet, he muttered to Sarah, his assistant on the other line. No emailed documents. Keep checking. We need to see what they're claiming. His voice was taut with frustration. At last, he ended the call and glanced at Harper, forcing a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Could be they're bluffing, Harper offered weakly. Maybe there's no real evidence and they're stalling. James exhaled, stepping around the counter to gently cup her shoulders. They're definitely stalling, but they might still run a twisted story. We have to be ready. She nodded. We've handled threats before, but this feels bigger, a major publication. Before James could reply, an alert pinged his phone. He glanced at the screen. Incoming email from the City View. In an instant, both tensed. He opened it, scanning lines of text. A handful of PDF attachments loaded at the bottom. Harper stood leaning close. What does it say? James read aloud, voice firm. They claim these are copies of unpaid loan agreements bearing your father's name. They also mention a letter that references me helping you with living expenses. He gave a frustrated shake of his head. I never wrote any letter. This is nonsense. Harper's face paled. They forged it, or someone lied about my dad. He never took out massive loans. We barely scraped by, but that's why we ended up in a small apartment. If we had huge debts, we would have known. James downloaded the attachments. On the screen, a grainy set of documents showed a typed contract with her father's name typed over lines referencing large sums. The signature was scrawled and faint. Another PDF displayed an alleged letter, a typed note supposedly from James Anderson to an unnamed charitable foundation, describing how he'd volunteered to cover Miss Harper Morris's expenses. Harper's chest tightened. That's all false. I'd know if my father borrowed that kind of money, and you never wrote a letter like that. His jaw clenched. Exactly. We'll prove these are forged. He jabbed at his phone. Sarah, you seeing this? Great. Send it to our legal team. I also want a forensic expert to check for digital manipulation. We respond to the City View immediately. Demand a retraction before they even publish. He squeezed Harper's hand, guiding her into the living room to sit. We'll fight this head on. Worst case, if they go live with the story, we'll sue for defamation. But let's try to stop them from printing it at all. She listened, half-dazed, adrenaline spiking. What if they publish in the next hour? They said their deadline was morning, it's already past 7. James's phone pinged again. Another email. He skimmed it, grimacing. They're giving us 1 hour to respond or confirm details before they finalize the piece. They'll spin it as Anderson's hush-hush arrangement with a waitress whose father left behind massive debts. A wave of heat rushed through Harper's cheeks. That's such a lie. They want to frame me like some desperate gold digger whose father was a criminal or something. James wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They're trying to create a salacious angle, but we'll crush it. He dialed a number quickly. After a moment, he said, Yes, let me speak to Derek Campbell. I want him on the phone now. A tense minute later, the editor's voice crackled through speakerphone. Mr. Anderson, we haven't received a formal statement. Because we're still reviewing your so-called documents, James snapped. We see multiple red flags indicating forgery. If you publish these lies, you open yourself to a massive defamation lawsuit. I strongly advise you to retract. Campbell's tone was clipped, defiant. We have a reliable source who insists your source is lying, Harper cut in, voice trembling with contained fury. My father died in an accident. He never left behind monstrous debts, and James has never funded me through any charitable foundation. Why don't you investigate your source's credibility instead of smearing an innocent family? A hush, then a cold reply. Ms. Morris, we're fulfilling our journalistic duty. If these documents are indeed forged, you can present evidence, but the story goes live in an hour unless you produce a valid counterproof. James's nostrils flared. So, you want me to prove a negative, that I didn't sign a letter that never existed? Ridiculous. We'll see you in court. He ended the call, cursing under his breath. Harper's hands shook. It's happening again. They're running with no real verification, just sensational claims. James steadied her. We'll do everything we can. Let's get on a group call with the lawyers. The City View isn't some gutter tabloid, but they're crossing a line if they rush an unverified piece. He fired off instructions urging the legal team to draft a cease and desist, threatening immediate litigation. Sarah worked in tandem, forwarding them the suspect documents, highlighting inconsistencies. Their forensic expert flagged obvious manipulations, signatures that didn't match known samples, formatting that pointed to cut-and-paste jobs. Time ticked by with agonizing slowness. The sun climbed. City traffic buzzed below. Harper paced the penthouse, phone clutched in her hand, occasionally texting Lydia to ensure she and Ben were okay at school. She was too tense to eat, too furious to sit still. Just before 9, James looked up from his laptop, brow furrowed. They posted it. The story is live. Harper felt her stomach drop. What does it say? He grimly navigated to the City View's site. The headline read, Anderson's secret beneficiary, hidden debts, and a waitress's windfall. The article recapped the false narrative. Harper's father allegedly drowning in private loans. Harper now rescued by James's wealth. The piece insinuated that Harper had manipulated him into covering for her father's misdeeds, painting her as cunning. They cited the forged letter as proof. She skimmed the paragraphs, seething. They mentioned my siblings, too, saying we were kept afloat by hush money from Anderson. This is disgusting. James clenched his fists. The article ends with a claim that Anderson's refusal to comment suggests guilt. But we did comment. They ignored it. Now what? Harper whispered, tears pricking her eyes. Everyone can see this. Lydia's classmates, the diner customers, the board members at your firm. James set his jaw quietly furious. "We go nuclear. The lawyers file for immediate injunction to remove the article. We push a press statement revealing the forgeries. Let's gather the evidence of digital manipulation and proof your father's finances never matched these claims." He dialed the law team again, voice clipped. They laid out a plan: file an emergency motion, distribute a press release, and hold a short press conference within the hour to denounce the story. Harper felt her nerves fray, but she nodded in agreement. "A press conference? You mean stand in front of cameras and reporters?" James met her gaze, softened. "It's your choice. I won't force you. But it might help the public see your sincerity if you speak too." Her thoughts whirled. She'd never faced a row of cameras except for that chaotic paparazzi fiasco. Yet now, if she stayed silent, the world might believe the lies. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll do it." 40 minutes later, they arrived at a small press briefing room James sometimes used for corporate announcements. Word spread quickly that the young CEO of Anderson Investments was addressing false allegations regarding his personal life. A handful of local reporters and business bloggers gathered, some curious, others hungry for drama. Harper stood beside James, heart pounding. She wore a neat blouse, her hair pinned back. On the small podium, James's father, Robert, surprisingly waited. He had insisted on coming, dressed in a formal suit, leaning on his cane. He nodded at Harper, silent encouragement in his eyes. Sarah stepped up to the microphone first, introducing the panel and outlining the reason for the conference. "We are here to categorically refute the City View's baseless story involving Mr. James Anderson and Ms. Harper Morris." She then handed over the microphone. James spoke calmly, with practiced authority. He held up printed copies of the forged documents. "These so-called contracts and letters are provably fake. We have forensic analysis confirming inconsistent signatures, mismatched fonts, and digital tampering." He glanced at Robert, who gave a short, affirming nod. Harper swallowed, stepping forward. This was her biggest fear: public speaking in front of cameras. But James's presence steadied her. "My father did not leave us with enormous debts," she said, voice tight but clear. "He passed away in a tragic accident. There was no cover-up or windfall. This article exploits a lie to smear my family's name. James has been my partner and supporter, but not through any clandestine funds." A reporter piped up from the front row. "Miss Morris, how do you explain these documents naming your father?" She inhaled. "I can't explain them because they're fabricated. Anyone can type a name on a PDF and sign scribbles. The City View didn't show me or James any real evidence until they published. We have proof from forensic experts that these images are tampered. We'll release it publicly. That's all I can say." Another voice. "Mr. Anderson, do you suspect the source is the same paparazzo who targeted you months ago? Is this a vendetta?" James nodded, expression grave. "It appears so. A blackmailer tried to extort us previously. We refused. Now they found a new outlet. Regardless, we intend to pursue legal remedies. We've filed for an injunction to force removal of the article and a defamation suit against the City View and any individuals involved in forging these documents." A mild stir rippled through the room. Robert stepped up, surprising the crowd. "As the founder and majority shareholder, I stand fully behind my son and Miss Morris," he said, voice measured but firm. "This is a malicious act that attempts to undermine our family's reputation. We will not be intimidated." Reporters furiously scribbled. Cameras flashed. Harper's heart hammered, but a sense of fierce validation welled inside. They weren't just acting for her. They were united, publicly denouncing the lies. She cast a grateful glance at Robert, who offered a slight, respectful nod. They wrapped the conference swiftly. James's legal counsel distributed packets of the forensic findings. The final statement hammered home that any publication continuing to host the article faced immediate litigation. As they stepped away from the podium, a cluster of journalists hurled last questions, but Sarah ushered everyone out efficiently. Harper trembled, Adrenaline on high, but she felt triumphant. They'd fought back openly. No more hush-hush fear. That night, the media environment exploded with two contrasting narratives: the City View's initial claim versus the Anderson family's defiant press conference. Online, some tabloids tried to stir drama, but many reputable outlets began questioning the City View's journalistic standards. By morning, the meltdown was in full swing. The forged documents were quickly scrutinized by independent experts, matching James's team's conclusion. Under mounting backlash, the City View took down the article and issued a cautious statement about re-examining new evidence. Derek Campbell, the editor who insisted on running the piece, was reportedly suspended pending investigation. For Harper, relief came in a flood of tears as she read the retraction on her phone. She was at James's penthouse again, perched on the edge of his bed, reading the update. At this time, the City View cannot substantiate the claims regarding Mr. Anderson and Ms. Morris's late father. We regret any distress caused. James sat beside her, an arm looped around her shoulders. It's not a full apology, but it's something, he murmured, scanning the text. Better than letting the lie spread. She sniffled, burying her face in his chest. It's over then? He stroked her hair, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. It's over. We'll push for a public apology if needed, but at least they've pulled the story. His phone chimed, an email from the legal team. The blackmailer's identity had been partially traced. Apparently, it was the same unscrupulous paparazzo who'd hounded James at the diner. He had roped in a contact from the City View to push the story, forging documents for a sensational angle. Now, with the fiasco exposed, lawsuits were imminent. Harper gazed at James through misty eyes. It's unbelievable how far someone would go for headlines and money. He nodded grimly. People see my family name or your vulnerability and they pounce. But we're standing firm now. A pause. Then she exhaled a slow, calming breath. We are. Because we're in this together. James smiled softly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. Exactly. Days later, the dust settled. The City View fully retracted and apologized, overshadowed by legal threats. Robert, impressed by Harper's composure, called her personally to commend her strength and dignity. Meanwhile, Lydia and Ben, though rattled, resumed their normal routines, proud of Harper's stand in front of the cameras. With the false scandal behind them, James and Harper refocused on what truly mattered, building their life. One balmy evening, weeks after the ordeal, Harper found herself in the orchard behind the Anderson estate, the same orchard where Lydia and Ben had once explored. The sun sank low, casting a warm glow through the leaves. James led her to a secluded spot near an ancient apple tree, its branches thick and strong, leaves rustling in a soft breeze. She turned to him, eyebrows raised curiously. "What are we doing all the way out here?" He took both her hands, face earnest in the dappled sunlight. "I wanted a quiet place. The orchard was always my refuge as a kid. Now it's where I want to take a big step with you." Her heart pounded. "James?" He dropped to one knee, producing a small, elegant ring. The sight stole her breath. "Harper, you've turned my world upside down, and I never want it back to how it was before. You're genuine, fierce, and you've shown me what real love looks like. Will you marry me?" A wave of emotion crashed over her, tears springing to her eyes. She recalled their first hesitant conversations in the diner, the battles with tabloids, Robert's uncertain acceptance, her siblings' delight. Through every storm, they'd grown stronger. "Yes," she choked out, voice trembling. "Yes, of course." Relief and joy lit James's face. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a modest but beautifully designed piece reflecting her taste. She pulled him to his feet, wrapping him in a tight embrace. The orchard seemed to glow with the final rays of sunset, as if blessing their union. When they returned to the mansion, Robert was waiting in the sunroom with a subtle smile, as though he'd guessed what might happen. Lydia and Ben, who'd been invited for dinner, burst into excited shouts congratulating them. Connie, the longtime cook, popped her head in, teary with happiness. It was a moment Harper had never dared dream about, being welcomed not for James's money or status, but for who she was. She gazed at her siblings, the sprawling estate, and the man holding her hand, a wave of gratitude swelling in her chest. She belonged here, after all. They all gathered around the table in the garden, where a simple meal was laid out: roast chicken, fresh salad, glasses of lemonade. Not so different from that first dinner they'd shared as a hesitant, merged family. This time, though, the future felt wide open. As the sun dipped behind the mansion's silhouette, Harper leaned against James, ring glittering on her finger. Press releases, lawsuits, corporate expansions, new cafe plans, those matters would continue swirling. But in that golden hour, none of it overshadowed the sheer joy of being together. Robert raised his glass with quiet dignity. "To family," he said, eyes drifting toward Harper, Lydia, and Ben. "And to a future where we stand side by side." They all clinked glasses, laughter mingling in the warm night air. James turned to Harper, a gentle spark in his eyes. "We've come a long way from you handing me a sandwich in that diner." She smiled, tears of happiness threatening again. "And I'd do it all over if it led me right here." Their lips met in a tender kiss, soft, certain, and full of promise. Surrounded by the blossoming garden, watched by two families united by love and resilience, they sealed the moment that was once unimaginable. A waitress and a billionaire, forging an unbreakable bond, proving that genuine hearts and steadfast devotion could outshine every lie, every doubt, every gulf that once separated their worlds. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.